Good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Grady. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Inland Wetlands Commission of Monroe, and it is June 27th. It's currently 7:05. The first order of business, as always, is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll start with introducing the members of the commission present here tonight. Who's here? Keith, how are you? Starting over here at the right is Commissioner Keith Romano. To his left is Clark Gingbryce. To his left is Ross Mastroraco. To his left is Jim Stewart, our treasurer, who is a licensed professional engineer and a licensed land surveyor. To my left is Commissioner Lois Spence, who is our secretary. Next to her is Donna Szynski, who is our Inland Wetlands Commission and Land Use Coordinator. And to her left is Scott Schatzeline. I forgot all the things I'm supposed to say about him. He is our town engineer, inland wetlands agent, licensed professional engineer, and all sorts of good guy. Oh, yeah, land use director, town engineer, inland wetland agent, licensed professional engineer, yes.
Really nice.
And Monroe's handsomest. Sorry. Been a long week already.
Oh boy. That's good to hear about that.
What did I just do? Alright, so before we start, I'd like to read our mission statement and how our meeting will proceed. The objective and purpose of the Inland and Wetlands Commission is to provide for the overall protection and preservation of the inland, wetlands, and watercourses within the town of Monroe. In the normal course of our meetings, we will hear public hearings and other applications. The protocol for public hearings is to have an applicant make a representation or presentation to the commission, during which and after which the commission will be asking the applicant questions. Excuse me. The commission will then review town, staff, and other independent comments. The meeting will then be opened up to public comment. I will ask that all comments be made to the chair or the commission. After any and all comments, pro, in opposition, or of a general nature are made, the applicant will be given the opportunity to respond. It is not necessary the applicant respond, but generally in their best interest to do so. There will be no further opportunity for new questions unless new material is entered in as evidence or testimony during their response. Please keep any and all comments pro and cons specific to inland wetlands related matters. Other applications that do not involve public hearing will follow a similar format, with the exception that there will be no public comments allowed. The meeting follows our published agenda unless otherwise amended. The agenda is up on the front table in green if anybody wants a copy. Are there any changes to the agenda tonight?
Yes. So we have the addition of, under item number 5, application hearing determinations. I'd like to add IWC 2018-09, address 275 Moose Hill Road, owner Chavez. It's for a single-family home with associated site improvements within an upland review area. I also would like to add under, item 8, under bond release reductions and reports, IWC 2015-06, 176 Hammertown Road for a bond release request. And under general discussion, it would, I'd like to add V13-10, 35 Ridgedale Road, 107 Norr Road, and IWV 2014-19, 225 Turkey Roost Road. And there is a referral from another town, which is regarding address 7180 Main Street and 7192 Main Street in Trumbull for the commission. Okay?
Thank you.
And that can go under correspondence also.
All right. Now is a portion of our agenda reserved for general public participation. This is for comments from the public, not related to items on this agenda, but are related to the inland wetlands water courses in the town of Monroe. Seeing none, moving right along. We have no subdivision report recommendations to P and Z. On to regulated activities, no regular meetings, which brings us to public hearings. IWC 2018-06, 485 Pepper Street, Monroe Recycling and Aggregates, applicant Doug Reich, RLA, Solely Engineering, representative, construction of enclosed crushing and screen manufacturing facility, storage building, open storage bins, and associated parking and site development. This is to be the opening of our hearing. Good evening. Say that again?
It's the opening of the public hearing, so you read the legal notice in.
Yep.
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay.
Just a second, please.
Of course. Housekeeping is important.
Notice of public hearing in Inland Wetland Agency, Monroe, Connecticut. Monroe Inland Wetlands Commission will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, June 27, 2018, at 7 p.m. in the Town Hall Council Chambers, 7 Fan Hill Road, on the following application. IWC 2018-06, 485 Pepper Street, Monroe Recycling and Aggregates, construction of enclosed crushing and screening manufacturing facility, storage buildings, open storage bins, and associated site improvements. Applications are available for review in the Inland Wetlands Office at Town Hall. A copy of the legal notice dated June 12, 2018 is on file in the office of the Town Clerk. Lois Spence, Secretary.
For the record, that was published.
That was published
Twice.
Thursday, June 14, 2018, and Thursday, June 21, 2018.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, members of the commission. For the record, my name is Kevin Soley. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Connecticut with Soley Engineering. Office is located here in Monroe at 501 Main Street. Here tonight to talk about a project at 485 Pepper Street. With me here this evening is Jim McManus from JMM Wetland Consulting Services, who is our soil scientist on this project. The subject site is located at 485 Pepper Street, so this is just an aerial of the town of Monroe. Route 25 runs north-south along the western edge of town, and 485 Pepper Street is along the northern end of the Pepper Street loop. The lower end of the Pepper Street loop starts at near Route 59, which goes towards Easton, and then the northern end of Pepper Street is here. We're just a little bit far in on the east for that. So just to give some orientation, Route 25 again runs north-south. Pepper Street at its northerly intersection in this location continues this way. The Pepper Street Business Park, Cambridge Drive is to the north of the site, and this is located across the street from a couple industrial buildings in close proximity to really good stuff, just to orient everybody. So the existing property is 5.94 acres. It is currently improved with a single-family residence and an old shed and some other disturbed areas. The property is zoned industrial, however, it has a pre-existing non-conforming residential use. There are approximately 1.07 acres of wetlands towards the rear of the property. The site grades Pepper Street. There's some drop along Pepper Street as you go from the north along the northerly to the southerly end of the frontage of the lot. And then this upper area is relatively disturbed, developed, and then the grade approaches towards the rear of the wetlands. There's a lot of evidence of disturbance towards the rear of the property here, close proximity to the wetlands. Jim McManus will talk a little bit more about the wetlands a little bit later in the presentation, but we will note that as part of his delineation and his observation, including in his report, is he did find evidence of wood frogs in here. So we did pay very special attention to that in terms of maximizing buffers in accordance with some recommendations in terms of when you're dealing with those type of species and potential vernal pools. So the proposed project proposes to redevelop the easterly portion of the property to maintain the existing 3,600 square foot residential building on the property, to convert that into an office, to construct a new driveway along the northern edge of the property on Pepper Street. This portion of Pepper Street is part of the reconstruction, and they're actually lowering Pepper Street considerably in this location, so we've designed the site to accommodate the existing grades, but also during construction, there's going to be a temporary driveway provided into the site in this location here, so our site's been designed to accommodate not only existing conditions, but also future conditions once that roadway that roadway project moves forward, which I'm not sure the schedule for that.
Yeah, the next two of us.
Okay.
We're waiting for input from DOT.
Okay.
And it's supposed to be coming now for several months.
Okay. Just from an existing condition standpoint, so as I said, it's a little bit higher in elevation from here. There's a low corner in the easterly corner of the property in this location here, and then the rest of it obviously drains towards the rear. And that's important because we did want to make sure that as part of our design, we're maintaining drainage patterns. I will say that as part of the Pepper Street project, their plans had identified a small area here that they had considered wetland, but based on our investigation, it really just seems to be a low spot where water is ponding, but there wasn't any indications of a wetland soils to actually consider that a wetland. But either way, we maintained and protected the limits of that as part of our project. So we're proposing the construction of, or maintain the existing residential structure here, and the construction of approximately 4,000 square foot structure, which will be a crushing and processing facility done within an enclosed building. So essentially this operation will be, they'll bring in clean fill and rock aggregates, which will go into the building through a crushing and screening operation to create storage piles, and that material, which is considered clean fill in accordance with DEP's requirements, would then be located and stored into 5 covered storage bins towards the rear of the property and 2 additional covered storage bins towards the front of the property. So the operation from a manufacturing standpoint, from a storage standpoint, is primarily done completely within buildings, and the material stored within covered buildings, covered structures. There's a small open uncovered storage bin in this location here, which will be for some aggregates which may come in and out, or some clean fill. It could also be used for the storage of construction materials, pipes, things like that. And then there will be some parking of vehicles on the property in this location here. The entire area is proposed to be paved, and our site's been designed with curbs to ensure that we're able to capture and collect all stormwater runoff and provide treatment for that runoff. So from a grading and drainage standpoint, as I stated, we've designed so the site's actually going to be paved. Stormwater will be collected through a series of catch basins routed through stormwater conveyance systems. We have 2 systems and 2 discharges. We have a small underground detention system along the I guess eastern edge of the property here, so that this has been designed to basically capture some of this drainage area in this location, and then actually attenuate and discharge into this lower corner and match the actual rate of runoff that contributes to that area currently. The balance of the area will be collected. As I stated, these covered structures will have a gutter system that will all be collected and routed into an underground detention system. We have proposed hydrodynamic separators, water quality units designed as pre-treatment before any discharge into those underground detention systems, and these systems have been designed to attenuate any increase in runoff associated with the change of impervious surface from existing conditions to the proposed conditions. One of the things we wanted to make sure we were doing is the discharge from this larger system here. We actually looked at it a couple different ways. We wanted to make sure that because there was, and we did find evidence of wood frogs in this larger wetland area, this lower portion here is actually ponded with standing water. But we wanted to make sure that we didn't create any above ground basins, which could be potentially considered a decoy pool. So we actually made sure we put all of our detention underground, protected underneath pavement areas. And we actually matched the flows so that we're providing the same contributing area and watershed and water flow towards this top end of this wetland as to not impact the hydrology of that wetland from a functionality standpoint. And it's been designed with a level spreader to make sure that this water will be discharged without creating any potential for erosion or anything similar. Also, you can kind of see, it's a little bit light, but you can see the contours through here, and there really is a considerable amount of, it's almost like evidence that material was kind of pushed through this area in the past, but you can see this toe of slope. We actually made sure that we weren't going past any existing limits of disturbance that seem to be out there. We're maintaining a considerable buffer from the edge of this wetland to our proposed retaining wall, which essentially acts as our limit and our boundary towards the western side of the property. We have a extensive, for the record again, our stormwater management plan was actually designed in accordance with the 2004 Water Quality Manual as provided by DEEP. From a soil erosion sediment control standpoint, we have an extensive SEC plan as part of our package. It includes silt fence with hay bale backing. We've actually sized and located our sediment traps to ensure that there's no question in terms of, from a construction standpoint, how this material is supposed to be protected and treated. We have swales identified to ensure that during construction this water is managed and controlled to make sure that there's no sediment disposition into any of the wetland areas or other off the property. From a utility standpoint, the existing house is currently served with a septic system, but based on where it's located, we are going to be installing a new septic system. This area was tested with the health department to ensure that it complies with current health codes. We're going to provide a water service connection to the existing building and underground utilities into the existing building here to upgrade that service, which currently is currently there. And then there will be some utilities from this existing house over to the proposed manufacturing building. And just for the record, again, from a use standpoint, this is a manufacturing facility. We're going to be manufacturing construction aggregates from existing natural materials. We have an extensive landscaping plan, which focuses not only on the planning and zoning requirements for landscaping buffers and screenings along the front of the property, but also we wanted to maintain and provide a substantive landscape buffer adjacent to the wetland area towards the western side of the property. I think with that, that'd actually be a good time to have Jim come up and talk a little bit about the existing resource on the property and talk a little bit more about how we incorporated his recommendation into our proposed design.
Good evening. For the record, James McManus, Certified Professional Soil Scientist with JMM Wetland Consulting Services, offices in Newtown. I originally visited the site on February 24th of this year to delineate the wetlands and to take some baseline data for the report that you have in front of you. And I revisited the site on April 11th to investigate this lower area here, which is the flooded portion. And I was looking for evidence of vernal pool. Well, we had vernal pool habitat. I noted it on February, but I wanted to go see if it was actually a breeding pool. I have two wetlands on the site. The bigger wetland is I call the numbered series. The one that's up by the northern property line is called my A series. Part of the numbered series, so which is in here, as you can see, is a wooded swamp. And then the southern end is a mix of shallow marsh, PFO on the fringes, and then a PSS, or a shrub swamp, kind of a mosaic in that lower part. Kevin already mentioned, but the eastern side of this wetland boundary, not all of it, but a good chunk of it, does follow along an abrupt boundary of fill soils, which you see there's more fill in here, and also debris. I found tires and concrete and various things spread about that eastern part. During the April 11th site visit, we found in excess of 70 egg masses of wood frogs, with the majority of the wood frogs located down in this area here, some over here, and a few over here. There were essentially two large rafts, which again was pretty much in that southwestern corner is where we found it, north of the stone wall. So this right here, along this property boundary, is a stone wall. So right in this area, you found a fair amount, and then we saw another good fair amount here. And the water at that time in those areas where we found the most wood frogs was about 2 feet deep. The northern wetland is kind of a remnant wetland. It was probably all connected at one point, and now it sort of receives runoff from the property to the north, as well as some surface water and probably some groundwater influence. That one's been pretty hammered, though, so there's not much going on there anymore. The function and values of these wetlands, the numbered series obviously is the most valuable of the two. We considered about 5 different principal functions: groundwater recharge, discharge, sediment and pathogen renovation. Wetlands are almost like the kidneys in the liver of the earth. They're sinks. They filter water, and then they let it go. It's supposed to be cleaner. That's the job of the wetlands. They're sediment sinks, and they take the runoff from the uplands, and it puts it through the wetlands, and when it lets it go, it's supposed to be cleaner. So these are some of the functions that we have: nutrient removal, production export, just releasing organics that other wildlife and other microorganisms can use. And then wildlife habitat, obviously we have a vernal pool here. The A series, which is the one again to the north, there were some no principal functions. There were some functions present, but limited to say the least. And that's all on page 6 of my report. Again, there are pictures. I'm not sure if your pictures are going to be color, but I do have a number of photographs showing the wetland mainly in February. Number one wetland is the flooded portion. It's in the southwestern corner. And if you proceed, it just shows various stages of both the number in the A series wetland. For instance, number 8 shows some of the debris that I found, tires there. That picture shows a bunch of different tires. And that's just up gradient of the numbered series boundary. As Kevin mentioned, there are no direct impacts proposed. However, we did look at some indirect impacts. Those are related to erosion control, removal of vegetation, habitat loss, wetland hydrology and stream flow, and water quality impacts. The ENS, or the erosion control impacts, are considered low moderate. And the reason for that is, Kevin already mentioned it, we have a robust ENS plan, erosion and sediment control plan. And also is that the soils on the site are considered low to moderate erodibility when they're exposed. So those two things together, we don't, shows a low moderate risk of potential for adverse impacts from erosion and sediment into the wetlands. Vegetation removal, we worked hard as a project team to ensure that the development would be done within the disturbed areas, which are either already cleared of vegetation or so disturbed that that really doesn't matter, and also giving a nice buffer to at least to the active vernal pool portion of the wetland. And we achieved that, in my opinion. The BMPs that Kevin went through will replenish the wetlands, particularly in the western part of the site. As you can see from the plan, we discharged the underground retention system to the northern part for a number of reasons. Number one is to keep it out of where the vernal pool portion is located, and also that's the way it works now. The water sort of comes down to the southwest and then discharges through the site into the water course that's actually a tributary to a perennial water course. Water quality impacts, we don't anticipate any with the use of the BMPs that were described. We're protecting that vernal pool not only from water quality, but as you can see, we have an extensive planting plan to ensure we have the appropriate buffer. And again, we've worked real hard to keep all the existing proposed development within the existing disturbed areas. And the reason we did that is because when you look at vernal pools, they only spend a very small time of their lives in the vernal pool. That's where they breed. They spend the rest of their time in the uplands or on the adjacent wetlands. And the habitat for that is all to the south and to the west. If you go over the rail trail, it's even more wetlands and more woods that way. They're not spending their time on the asphalt near the existing house or on a concrete pile that's been dumped there 30 years ago. They're spending their time to the west. So we keep the west good, we've developed the east, and that was our plan, and I think we achieved it. So it's my opinion, with diligent monitoring of the erosion controls during construction, we're not anticipating any adverse short or long-term impacts, not only to the water quality, but to the habitat, to the regulated resources and the functions they provide, not only on-site, but to the off-site wetlands and water courses.
Thanks, Jim. And just to add to that, I want to go back to one of our earlier slides, just to kind of give some context. You can see, so this site, where it's located, immediately west of the property is the rail trail. So there's a nice resource there, and then behind that, it's all land owned by Aquarian Water Company. So from an area, from a habitat standpoint, I believe the majority of anything that, any of these areas, that there's a considerable amount, more than that 75% number that the Army Corps looks for in terms of terrestrial habitat that's available, that's undisturbed, that's not going to be disturbed, unless Aquarian decides to somehow redevelop their property, but that certainly doesn't seem likely. So we felt that what we were doing and focusing on, as Jim said, focusing on maintaining our developed area within the areas that have been previously developed and disturbed, we wouldn't have any adverse impact. So with that, we did receive, we've actually gone through 2 rounds of comments with Scott. I think in your packet, we had submitted revised plans last Wednesday, so you should actually have a set of drawings in your packet that reflect our second round of response to Scott's comments. I think his latest iteration, kind of shows that I think we've actually done a pretty good job of responding to most of his comments. I don't really think there's anything still outstanding that was of any real substance, but I certainly think if there were, we can work through it with Scott. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission may have.
The pictures that you were showing us of the overall site, is that, if we were to look at that today, is that accurately depicting what is out there, or is it yours?
The most recent aerial, I think, from Google is probably 2016. There has not been any other work or activity on the property. We're working for a contract purchaser. We don't believe the owner's been doing anything out there. There hasn't really been much activity out there. It's in a trust. There's a bunch of siblings that have been trying to sell it for years. So I don't believe there's been any real activity. So I think this is pretty indicative of what the current conditions would reflect.
I was just curious because the way it was sounded like the majority of it had already been disturbed, and that doesn't look terribly disturbed. So that's why I was asking.
I think we're talking like historically disturbed.
Okay.
There's trees now, mature trees growing on fill plots.
I see.
You can kind of see it, and it's a little bit light, but you can see, there's a change from a contour standpoint where these are kind of running, this way, and then there's almost like the remnants of the bottom of a fill pile where material seems to just have been like dumped over the years, or encroaching closer and closer to the wetlands, and this is kind of like the toe of that slope. So when we were working on our design, and I can tell you, when we initially started this, we had a design that was pushing closer to the wetland area, and then as soon as we got Jim's report and he started to let us know that he saw evidence of wood turtles, we had to completely redesign what we were doing, and we significantly reduced our overall limit of disturbance. We increased our buffers substantially, and I think actually some of the alternatives that were submitted represent that, because they were some of our earlier iterations. We were looking at much larger bin storage, and the whole development footprint really had to shrink as we started to get into it a little bit more. And we've tried to be very responsive to respect those resources.
And there was a concerted effort as the project team to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh, we never shot. No, there was a concerted effort to ensure that lower part of that A-series wetland still functions as it is right now.
Could you walk us through the whole process from when a truck pulls in the driveway,
Sure.
where he goes,
Yep.
what he does, And then you said there was dirt and rock and aggregate and that kind. But what other materials are there, and where's the finished product?
Yep.
Blah, blah, blah. The
Sure.
whole thing from soup to nuts, if you will.
Okay, so a truck will come in that'll be loaded with, you know, larger rock material or something like that. They'll come in, this is a truck scale. They'll pull on the truck scale, they'll get weighed to determine how much is in their vehicle. They'll come over, they'll dump that material into a small surge pile, and this is all on asphalt. That material will then get loaded inside the building. It will go through a primary crusher, a jaw crusher, and then a screener. The finished product, which is a screened, clean construction aggregate. Within this building, there will be all types of controls for dust suppression and, they'll be outfitted with like a sprinkler type system to keep the dust down so that the material that comes out is relatively clean. And then this material will come into finished piles. These piles will be collected and brought into these storage bins and stored under cover. So these bins here and these bins here will store different product types based on what they're manufacturing that particular day. It'll be stored here, so then that truck that came in and that dumped, they may go back on the scale, get weighed again to determine how much was brought in. That'll be part of the transaction and using the facility. Or that truck would then come and be loaded with one of those finished products, and then it would load, and then it would leave the facility and probably get weighed again to determine how much was actually put into the truck, just so they know, pricing and how they're operating their business. So any of this, we've had some experience with this, so we know what both the Wetlands Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission would be expecting. So we're actually proposing to pave this entire area, much to the chagrin of the developer, who wasn't hoping he would have to do that. But we've done that in a way where we've actually, we've provided curbs through here, we've provided water quality measures so that any of that water, any of that material, if there's any kind of rain, those will, that water will be collected by catch basins, it'll be treated, it'll remove any of those suspended solids, so it'll be stored and so that the water that comes out of this underground detention system and discharge into this level spreader will be clean, and it'll meet the requirements of the water quality manual.
All the water in that building that you're saying for dust suppression, and I'm assuming goes into floor drains?
We're not proposing any floor drains, so this will have some, so any of that, it really just, it's not enough where you're gonna have condensation or anything actually getting onto the floor. This material goes right on the construction aggregate as it goes through that process, and that material just kind of absorbs it so it doesn't become airborne. So it's not something that's actually gonna create.
Not like a wash down.
Right.
So you're gonna have a payloader working from the surge pile and bringing it into the head of this building?
That's correct.
And then you're gonna have a conveyor belt coming off the back of the building
That's correct.
and dumping it into a pile on that asphalt area?
That's correct. There's a
Down-
small, yep.
Where's the asphalt area? Where's the finished pile,
So
it's shown where it comes out?
here.
There, it's coming out there.
Yep, so this is the, if you're familiar with the process, this is the discharge from the scalp belt for that jaw crusher.
Okay.
And then there are piles for what's coming off the screener. And we've identified those, they've been sized appropriately, and this is really gonna be a materials management exercise for the operator to ensure that as those piles, as the materials run through this process, those piles are picked up and collected and put in the appropriate bins.
Well, I thought the whole thing was inside a building. Now I'm really confused.
The equipment and the operation of going through the crushers and the screeners is within a building. However, those machinery and that equipment, they do have conveyor belts which take some material, which basically create piles that have the stuff that comes off of the material when it goes through the jaw, or from the screener itself, it creates finished product, whether you're making 3/4 inch minus or 3/8 stone or whatever the configuration of that screener is, it then puts that material out over 3 conveyors. So the process itself happens within the building. The discharge of that product goes outside of the building, and that's then collected and routed around. So, and that's all part of our process is obviously, this area would be considered outdoor storage. So we had to make sure that this was designed in accordance with the planning and zoning requirements in terms of what's permitted from an outdoor storage standpoint. So it's restrictive, and it's going to be, you know, it's going to be an interesting site to see operating.
So, I mean, I see the difference in size between the surge pile and the product piles. So, I mean, is that pile gonna get cleaned up every night?
Yes. Well, it's the pile itself, we've identified that area and determined the limit of where that pile can be based on the permissive outdoor storage areas. So all these areas are good, they're delineated, they're established, they're maintained, and they're gonna have to operate within those constraints so that they comply with their.
Well, the reason why I ask is, does that pile need, I mean, let's say it's a big pile and it's raining, does it need sediment erosion control? You know,
Well, so
during a typical day, or is it the kind of thing that's only happening during good weather, and it's cleaned up after? See what I'm getting at? And then
Yeah.
you've got finished piles that are again not contained and not covered.
I mean, this is going to be, from an operations standpoint, they're going to have to be maintaining these piles because you're not going to be able to just have loose piles everywhere and that potential, that issue. You know, I don't believe they need to provide, or we would want to provide, you know, independent SEC measures around those individual piles just from an operations standpoint. And I think the way we've designed the site is that's going to be able to drain and then get collected through the system. And they're going to have a robust maintenance system for the drainage system itself, because we've incorporated deep sumps so that there's going to be room for that. And you know, I don't believe we would have the need to provide additional SEC measures around those piles, because they really are going to have to be maintained and managed as they go through the process.
There are walls to the screening building?
Yes. Yep. There are some overhead doors and windows and such to allow for the building has walls. I don't know if we included it in our submission to Wetlands, but in our planning and zoning submission, we have elevations that show how that's going to be. You know, in order to be a building, to meet the definition of structure, it needs to have a roof supported by columns or walls. All of these have walls. We had an informal discussion with planning and zoning. As you may remember, we had another application that had some covered storage bins. We weren't considering it a structure, but by the zoning definition, it is a structure. It is a building because it has a roof supported by walls. We had an informal discussion with planning and zoning. They didn't really like the definition as it reads, so we actually incorporated not only you know, concrete walls around these bins, but they're all going to have covers on the front as well with vinyl, you know, vinyl covers to actually create 4 walls for not only for all of these storage bins.
Are the crushers mobile, or are they going to be stationary there?
They're likely going to be mobile equipment.
So to service it, you'll pull it out.
The service would probably happen within the structure itself, because we wouldn't want to have service of equipment out in the parking area for whatever that could mean. And I think, so these will probably be maintained within the building itself, and then, yeah.
So there's going to be a lot of hydraulics versus electric.
I'm not really sure exactly what products that they're you know, they're working with a crushing vendor to source the materials, the equipment itself.
And the area that's so the gray areas are the parts that are covered. And
Correct.
The 2 ends of that building on the roadside are open.
These are uncovered, correct. So this is an uncovered bin for product storage.
Is that like an overflow in case that pile gets too big, or something else? It's possibly rock and dirt.
It may be some finished product, so it may have some stockpiles of clean stone or something along those lines, but it may also be used for just pipes or catch basin covers or standard construction equipment. Again, that's you know, it's inert. It's not, you know, there wouldn't be any storage of any kind of chemicals or anything like that. And then this is more for the parking of vehicles with some additional storage area.
There's no maintenance facility here?
No.
And the other question I had was, so that area at the end of the parking lot where you said it was filled in previously?
All through here?
Yeah, that area. Are they going to be doing any remediation on that, like taking anything out?
Well,
Or is it non-disturbed area?
We really want to try to limit the disturbance. So whatever's happened in the past, you know, now there's mature trees kind of growing up on top of all this stuff that was kind of done haphazardly without any kind of regulation or control. So rather than going in and pulling stuff out, we want to just minimize our disturbance, and that's why we've kind of kept this limited disturbance as tight as we have. So we can basically come in, we can cut only the trees that we need to, we can put in our RCC measures, and we can basically build from there.
What if they find like unsuitable fill under there and it's not buildable on, even if it's a parking lot, and it has to possibly go outside that limit? Possible?
Well, I think even if part of this excavation or preparation for, because this is a retaining wall in the back, so we are raising the grade, and there is a proposed retaining wall back here. So if while they're doing that, if they uncover some unsuitable materials, they'll have to, you know, we still don't want them to push closer to the wetland. We don't want to expand that limited disturbance unnecessarily, but they'd obviously have to do anything from a soil structural remediation standpoint.
The tires and stuff that you said that are in there all
Yeah,
that
are
stuff.
you removing the tires?
I'm sorry. Well, anything like that, that's that type of debris would be.
You're not leaving that there, you're taking that out.
Right.
So you'll be doing some remediation that's.
Within the limits of, within our limits of disturbance. Again, we don't want to go closer, we don't want to create
We're
additional.
not looking to cut down trees so we can take the fill out.
Right.
But it looks to me like you're gonna clear that area up to, what, 10 feet from the wetlands?
The steeper slopes in the fill, these slopes are not as steep as you can tell. These are steep.
Uh-huh.
Now, it's not all steep, but this is, when I found the tires, I don't know where exactly, I'm gonna say they're here.
You can actually see it here a little bit better.
Yeah.
So down through here, there's actually kind of like an existing path already that exists, that it isn't, that doesn't have vegetation on it. So we're kind of using that as our edge, so we're not, you know, you can see that through here. Like that kind of exists, that path exists. It seems like there's already like the former owners or the current owners were almost using that as like a path to get down to that lower area. So we're not trying to push further than that. At least not that would result in significant vegetation removal or anything like that.
But you're proposing, I guess I'm not following, because you're proposing to replant that whole area when you're done, correct?
Well, yeah, but we're maintaining, so you can kind of see, so like right here, that's an existing tree line,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
we're not proposing to remove those trees. We're proposing to work up to the limit of those trees. We'll put in our SEC measures kind of intermixed with those. We're not going to cut the trees down to put in silt fence and hay bales. We're going to kind of work up to that limit, and then once we do the rest of the work, we're going to restore that area with additional vegetation.
Okay, because I don't quite understand why you're not just stopping at the retaining wall. Are you proposing to grade up so you have less of a retaining wall?
We aren't proposing grading through that area, no.
So-
And part of it is because, well, we want to try to restore a buffer that's improved, that's an improvement from what's there from a planting standpoint. And then really from an SEC standpoint, it's really just managing that water.
Okay, so some of it is managing the water.
Yeah, I mean, this is the de facto low spot, so we want to make sure that there's an actual sediment trap there so that during construction, that trap is sized so it can actually, you know, receive water and be sized to take out the required sediment that would be that would be contributing to that area. But like, so this limited disturbance here, that's because we're trying not to touch that from a grading standpoint. You know, we're trying to maintain this area through here, maintain that existing line, and then basically replenish that with additional buffer plantings.
And that can't be up from the wall?
Well, it's an existing low point. So even if we were to stop at the wall, there'd still be water draining towards it. And a lot of the times what happens is, you know, the SEC manual by DEP has a stringent requirement in terms of how large sediment traps have to be based on the contributing area. Oftentimes, some applicants don't even determine where those sediment traps have to be, and they leave it up to the contractor. The contractor usually, or is supposed to, make sure that they design those traps so they actually have enough storage area to collect and contain the sediment that's going to be contributing to it. That doesn't always happen. We like to try to say, listen, you have to put a trap here, and it needs to be this size because this has to accommodate this much volume. On our SEC plan, we call out that temporary sediment trap has a minimum storage capacity of 5,400 cubic feet. So we needed to make sure that, so we could say, yeah, we want to stop at the wall, but there's still going to be water draining there because it's a default low spot. If we don't say you need to provide this much storage for sediment, we can't guarantee that that's actually going to be done, and then that sediment is just going to potentially, either go up against the silt fence and then over top and go into the wetland area, or not be maintained. So we just try to take the belt and suspenders approach for SEC when we prepare our SEC plans. For the record, I'm also a certified professional in sedimentation and erosion control as administered by EnviroCert International, for whatever that's worth.
I noticed in your first set of plans, actually the second set of plans, you responded to one of Scott's comments, and that little island that you have there in the bottom with that LOD written all around it, that is a grove of trees from what I understand, and that Scott wanted you to save that bunch of trees, and that's why there's LOD written around it. Am I correct in my assumptions?
I believe
That's the
so.
way I believe that's the way I read all the paperwork. How demarcate that so that the people with the chainsaws don't cut it down?
We can mark it with construction fence, provide kind of like a limit of tree protection around that area. We'd be happy to incorporate that on the plans, to provide construction fencing around that area to be preserved.
This is just too easy when you're clearing everything else to just continue on. And I think one of the other comments that I had seen on Scott's, if I understood what he was talking about, but it didn't happen. In the bottom of that, just below the LOD island, I'm calling it, you have a very distinct corner. It's a 90-degree angle. Does that have to be that much? Can it, because it doesn't appear that you need that much extra cleared area in that corner if you were to follow what appears to be that little path.
Yeah, we can certainly pull
And
this
just
around.
round it off.
Absolutely.
I'm
we can
just
do that.
looking to save anything I can
Sure,
that is near, especially near the vernal pool.
absolutely. We can pull that around.
Okay. I don't have what.
Sometimes my engineers just like to draw straight lines.
Engineers like straight lines, I understand
It's
that.
easier on AutoCAD.
It is, right? It's just, yeah.
Ken, what's in the front detention system by the road, what's cleaning the water there?
We have so this is a water quality unit. Hang on, let me just double check.
Kind of like the-
So, our gradient drainage plan, there's a call out on our plan which is pointing to a hydrodynamic separator, CDS 2015-4G, which is actually, for some reason, not shown graphically, but we are proposing a hydrodynamic separator upstream of that underground detention system. The call out's there, the leader's there.
Yeah.
But for some reason that structure isn't shown. But we are proposing to provide a water quality, and obviously that's a Scrivener's error.
Or is that just before the water goes into the underground recharge, or is that after?
No, it's before, it's in advance. So water, it comes through here, it gets collected in this basin, and then it goes into the system, and then this is the outlet control for that system.
Where's the water quality going?
Here,
Between the catch basin and the subsurface?
yes.
So aren't those two,
We may actually be able to make that catch basin that water quality unit.
I was just that it seems to me that there's not enough, is there a path that the water has to follow through that set of galleries? Because it looks like it's just gonna go in and out without ever hitting the rest of the
So that's really just so there isn't a very large area going to that corner now, right? And we wanted to make sure not only were we reducing our overall, but we're also reducing the volume or the rate of runoff going to the individual areas. That's part of what we worked through with Scott. So this system isn't that large. It doesn't need to be that large because we don't have that much drainage. The majority of our site drainage that we're collecting, we're routing towards the back. So we only have a very small area that's going towards that front corner. So we don't need that much storage to attenuate. But that structure has been sized to ensure that we can attenuate the rate of runoff leaving from that area.
So I didn't phrase my question well, and I didn't examine the detail sheet in great detail. But is the water channeled through the entire system so that it enters at one end, goes all the way through and around, and then comes out the other end?
Yes.
Or but it's not free reign?
No,
it just go where it wants?
It does not go where it wants. It is, if you go to actually sheet 303, our detail sheet, we have our 2 detention system layouts, and it actually shows how that water comes in,
Okay,
how it takes a circuitous path through the chambers, and then it goes out.
that was a new question I came up with just tonight, so I didn't think of looking at it. Okay, I see. Thank you.
Is it vented? The water goes in, air's gotta come out, right?
There are access manholes, so it does provide for venting, but basically the water goes in and then it goes around these are concrete, 4 foot high concrete galleys. The water goes in, it goes around, and then it gets outletted.
And one of the manholes seems to be underneath the big pile that comes.
I mean, it's adjacent, it's adjacent to, obviously we wouldn't want that pile of material to be on top of that, but that is an access manhole just so if you have to clean it out from a maintenance standpoint.
How big could that pile be? The pile waiting to get trucked?
I mean, it's limited in size to make sure we comply with our outdoor storage requirement. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at our material, but it's not, I mean, you know, it's something that they're gonna have to actively manage.
It's probably not more than a day's worth of processing, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything else that's going to be processed on this property other than dirt and rock? Is there any recycled asphalt coming into it?
Yes, they may bring in some asphalt chunks, and
then
that is,
what happens with that?
that's deemed clean fill in accordance with DEP.
Is
So-
it processed in any other different way?
Nope,
Is it heated?
No. There's no processing other than putting it into a crusher and having it come out a screener. And that'll get intermixed with other material to make different products that are used for construction. But there is no other process to how that's going to be, they're not introducing heat or anything else to it.
Okay. How about the noise quotient? Is this a noisy plant?
Well, that's part of, there's gonna be noise attenuation built into the building, and they have to comply with the noise regulations of the town of Monroe.
Does that mean Saturdays? There's some houses not far from there.
I mean, it's an industrial
There's a
district,
Close.
What's that?
but,
There's a house there.
This close is
Yeah.
But they're gonna make it into an office.
yeah, it is gonna become an office, it's gonna be,
There's a house right next.
I will say, I think this is old, because I'm pretty sure there's a whole, isn't there a big building back here now? Is that property?
Yeah, that's the guy that has the wood, like he
Oh, yeah.
processes,
Indoor?
trees. No, he's got wood outside, it's like piles of wood. I know where that house that is, but it's like, there is houses across the street.
Where, yeah.
They're like
It's gonna
kitty
be
corners to
noisy.
the right.
Could the surge pile be placed under cover?
From an operations standpoint, that'd be very difficult, and we're proposing to not have that be undercover.
It'd have to be 25 feet tall for dump trucks to dump that.
Clear. But the applicant's requesting that be outside.
How tall is the building gonna be that's gonna hold this screener?
I don't have the architectural plans with me, but it's well within the building height requirement. I want to say maybe 25 feet tall.
Is this the application where someone mentioned about like concrete curbs around the bend? Is that not?
No, we've never seen this application before.
Oh,
This is new.
We've
Similar
had-
to
we've
some
had-
others,
We've
though.
had numerous of those in the last
Yeah.
Yeah,
couple
it's like
meetings.
similar.
with curb and
I'm very
storage.
concerned about the quantity of sediment that's going to be generated on a daily basis. I mean, even if you clean out those catch basins once a week, it seems to me with a constant influx of dirt and rock, and chopping it up into smaller pieces of dirt and rock, that you're gonna have a nightmare in the lines of sediment. And I know it's on the property owner to maintain, but that's really extremely difficult to police. And
I was actually thinking the same thing, and I thought, I didn't know what their maintenance procedure would be, but something like a skid steer with a power broom on it, on site all the time, they would just put the guy in it for the last half hour a day and sweep off the parking lot. I would think that would be a logical thing to do anyways,
Yeah, but if it's raining and they're moving material and driving through it and tracking it all
The
over,
mud's
it's
amazing.
running.
Oh, yeah, where they're also dumping
I
them,
didn't
isn't that
realize
gonna
it was
just,
outside
It's gonna
piles.
be
Well, they
moving
have their
around.
protections in place, right? They just don't want to overload them, so that maintenance becomes a nightmare, and they're not keeping up with it, where if they had, one piece of equipment on the site, which was there, to be there all the time to maintain, really, why would they want to go through the headache? It's just maybe just have, if necessary, request, a maintenance, like a sweeping type of machine on site 100% of the time, so it's just there. It's just always there, and they don't want to do the right thing because letting your materials get all mixed up and muddy and whatever isn't profitable.
Well, upon first blush, this seems like an extremely intensive piece of process for this particular piece of land where it is, especially. I realize you've built in all the protections that you feel were proper for the vernal pool and the wetland, but it seems like this is an awfully intensive process here. Which brings me to my next, one of my, is that your URAs are depicted incorrectly. You've got the line at 100 feet, and this is a vernal pool, so the entire property is URA.
So part of the challenge with that is when we're dealing with, so we did a couple things. On our wetland application, we actually identified the 1.07 acres of wetland area, and we identified 4.8 acres of upland review area because we did incorporate a larger buffer from the vernal pools. So actually that upland review area is probably off the page. Additionally, based on the type of wetland that we have and where egg masses were found, it was very difficult to delineate the precise location of the vernal pool, so we couldn't actually do an offset of where that was. So we simply, to make sure that everything was in line with the regulations, we said, the overall area really is all part of upland review.
Was that square footage incorporated into the fee?
It was.
Good, thank you, I'm just checking. Thank you. Has P&Z, I guess what my question has nothing to do with P&Z.
We have a public hearing scheduled with planning and
Yeah,
zoning for July
okay.
17th, I think.
How is the access to the western bins? Is that from the back?
Yes, here?
Yeah,
Yes, these are all these bins face this direction. So access would be from this side.
so you got all your parking right next to where all the truck activity is gonna be.
So we have to provide parking to satisfy zoning requirements, but the parking demand for the actual site is not gonna be realized. So we're providing parking spaces there. However, there won't be any cars parked there because we have to provide parking for area that's considered the area that's considered storage. Just because it's, if you're building an industrial building and so much of it's warehousing or manufacturing or storage or whatever, you have to provide so many spaces per 1,000 square feet because it's assumed that there's going to be employees related to that. There's not going to be any employees related to the storage of material. So while we have to show a certain parking requirement to satisfy code, there's not gonna be any cars parked there.
So is the parking lot made bigger for the parking? Let's say the parking requirement magically disappeared, would you take 20 feet of that parking lot away?
We probably wouldn't take the full 20 feet because it does help from an operation standpoint, getting loaders in and out of those bins.
So what do you
Looks like
back a
it's
truck
tight as
down?
it is. Looks like it's gonna be tight as it is.
It is pretty tight, and yes, the truck does back down here.
All the way to the end, or is it back down and then the loader runs the length of the bins, loading the trucks?
I mean, they'll probably try to back down as close to whatever bin that they're loading from.
They're gonna be parallel to the building, they're not gonna go.
Yes, the trucks are gonna be backing down parallel with the front of the building.
Yeah, so that's tight, you need all that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What kind of roofing and sides are on these bins?
Concrete block walls, sides, similar to what was done for Eastern Land Management, those type of interlocking blocks. The roofing is a framed roof with, covered roof with, I believe, shingles. So that's gonna, or it might be a metal seat roof, actually, I can't recall. But it's not something that's porous or, it's gonna collect water. There's gonna be a gutter system, and that's gonna be collected and drained around. And then there's gonna be vinyl covers on the front of those as well.
And it's block all the way up to the roof, it's not like, 5 feet of block and then,
I think there's 8 to 10 feet of block, and then there may be, up to 5 feet of open area between the top of the block and then the bin itself. Or the roof itself. And the roof does have a pitch to it, so, this is higher than the back.
What would be the purpose of having an open area between the 8 to 10 feet and the roof?
Just the structure that they're proposing. They want to have that, I believe it's a 10-foot side wall. And then there's a little bit of an opening above it. I think it's like 3 feet and 7 feet in terms of the front to the back.
It's gotta be more than that. It's gotta be at least 14 feet high front, right?
I think it's 13 feet high in the front.
It's 13?
Or it might be. No, I think it's 17 feet in the front, because I think it's a 10-foot wall, 7-foot gap at the top of the roof, and then there's a pitch from the front to the back.
So is that in between each of the bins?
Yes.
They would only contaminate their own material if they were going over.
Well, I'm
the top.
thinking about water getting in, because water comes in, water goes out the bottom, and then we have it more.
And that water then gets collected and routed through the treatment train.
Oh, I know you're right for that one. He has, I know.
It's a whole roof, right?
Yeah. Yep.
The water isn't gonna get in there.
I think you're talking like if there's sideways rain or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, 10 feet away, there's open piles coming out from the conveyor belt, so the sideways rain factor, I think,
It's minor.
is minor compared to
They
the.
might be minor, but these are all, they add up. And I'm concerned because we do have a valuable resource right below it
Understood.
and very close to it.
Kevin, how are they gonna get the conveyors out of the building if it's a mobile?
The building's been designed so that these can actually open up and come out.
Oh, okay. So there's not full, they're like panels or something, or going to?
They're like almost like garage doors.
Oh, okay. Got it.
That's to maintain the
And
conveyor
I'm
belt.
just trying to envision this, I'm envisioning a missile silo.
No,
Is
no,
that what we're
I was talking
talking about
I think it's talking about the side of the wall going up like a garage door, all the way
Oh.
down.
Is that what you were explaining?
Well, probably to Keith's point, the screener, right? So they have the conveyors, but the conveyors like fold in on themselves so that when they're in transport, and then those, when they unfold the conveyors, they kind of unfold like this,
Oh, okay,
and then are out onto the side.
Transformers. I have a grandson.
would probably like this site.
Yeah, they probably would. Big trucks, can't go wrong with that. Is there any additives?
No. Other than water for dust suppression.
Where does this effluent filter go?
Septic tank.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
What's on the bottom of each bin?
Concrete.
Is there gonna be an office here?
Yeah, that existing house is going to serve as the office.
How are you going to build the wall? Describe the process, please, the retaining wall.
It'll be, describe the process. So they'll clear for the subbase, they'll put down a stone layer beneath it. They'll use gravity-type retaining wall blocks from Connecticut Precast. Those get put in, so if you go to sheet, come on, guys. Oh, I apologize, that looks like the detail somehow did not make it on this plan. Unless it's on the drawing. They're essentially, they're large interlocking blocks. They put down the first course of blocks, which are much wider and larger on the bottom. They set these with cranes, and then they basically build on top of them like Legos.
Will it be done from the upland portion or
Yes.
below? the
Yeah,
wall?
they drop, what happens is that they'll drop the first course of block, they'll place fill behind it, they'll drop the second course of block, they'll place fill behind it, so you kind of build from the uphill side as you place this, as you build this wall. So you have, you know, you put a block down, you fill up behind it, you put another block down, you fill up behind it, another block down, you fill up behind it, so you're on the upper
see.
edge,
Okay.
the high side of the wall.
The thermodynamic separators, are they also sand separators?
Yes, they meet the requirements to remove 80% of the total suspended solids in accordance with these requirements.
And
They're
now
not thermodynamic separators,
They're
they're
not
hydrodynamic separators. So they're swirl concentrators.
Okay, and the 80%, I'm assuming, is at peak production when it's first delivered?
Yes, it's for that first flush of
Well, I'm presuming that it's a machine, it doesn't work at peak efficiency forever.
it's not a machine, it's actually just, it's a swirl concentrator. So think about if you're in your pool and you make a whirlpool, all the stuff goes to the center, right? This operates the same way, so that stormwater comes into these units, it's run through a centrifugal pattern so that all the sediment collects in the center and then drops down into a storage chamber so that the water that actually leaves the site has all the solids removed from it.
And how does that storage container down below get cleaned out? And
It
how
gets
often?
vacuumed out
How often?
twice a year.
Okay, so on month 5, how efficient is that separator at that point?
Well, all of these, any of these units have to comply with, go through rigorous testing. The New Jersey DEP actually has a very stringent program, and that these have to meet those requirements. So they have to be, there's actually more storage than 5 months. I believe there's probably like a year's worth of storage so these things can function, but you want to maintain them twice a year to make sure that there's no issues.
Okay, so presuming that they're taking out 80%, which is, probably everybody's pipe dream, that means that the remaining goes into the storage chamber, not the storage chamber, but the galleries. And then it probably sits there. So how long does it take before those become inefficient because they're so clogged with extremely fine silt?
Well, I mean, part of the maintenance plan, we actually have recommendations not only for the hydrodynamic separators, but also for the underground detention system itself. All of this is done in accordance with all of the applicable requirements and regulations.
You can actually get in there and clean those out?
Yes, they have inspection ports all the way to the surface.
And to comment on what she's saying, I mean, if the first one's gonna get the most of it, then it's gonna follow the line. I mean, could put 4 of them, the first 4 cover, so that if it happens to be a lag of maintenance or too much than anticipated, you have more access to clean
Well,
more.
You know,
Or is that-
as we talk through this, you know, I've been thinking about what else we could do. I think your suggestion on having a sweeper there is a great idea. You know, there's really, as we look at our grading and drainage plan, there's kind of really, I think there's 2 structures which are really kind of susceptible to additional sediment in the stormwater runoff. There's this one immediately adjacent to the building, and then there's this one down gradient. What I could recommend is, during construction, you put silt sacks in catch basins. There's some new product out there that are kind of like catch basin inserts. So these are actual bags you can put inside of an existing catch basin. You can reuse them when they get full. You pull it out, you dump it out, you put it back in. Perhaps we could offer to have those 2 catch basins also include inserts as an additional belt and suspenders approach to ensure that those basins which are most susceptible to sediment and stormwater runoff could have an additional water quality element incorporated into their design.
Good idea. What takes care of the oil?
That also gets collected as part of the hydrodynamic separator. That also takes out oils and floatables.
So which number of catch basins would those be that you would propose those inserts?
So our basins aren't numbered. Some, depending on how complex the system is, do we number them? We have another application that actually has numbered basins. These aren't numbered, so it would be the basin south of the manufacturing building, and then the basin that's kind of in line with the end wall of the storage bins buildings. So it would be this basin and this basin. We could also incorporate one here, adjacent to the surge pile.
Is there any reason why you can't leave the sediment trap that's along Pepper Street as a detention basin instead of just flooding it down riprap?
The sediment trap, that one?
I can't see where you are.
This one. Here?
Yeah.
Yeah, the town's landscape requirements and buffer requirements. We're trying to make sure that we can have a robust buffer because we know that the commission is going to, Planning and Zoning Commission is going to be very interested in that. So we're actually proposing some plantings through there.
Wouldn't the detention basin provide more water quality?
It would. In order for a detention basin to provide water quality, it has to have sediment forebay. It has to have, the forebay has to be sized based on the, 25% of the overall basin itself. I think this area we would be limited because there is a steep slope through here. You can see the proposed contours. We are kind of grading down in a 3-to-1 slope. So trying to incorporate an above ground basin in a finished condition would simply require additional retaining walls. So we were trying to reduce that. So we were trying to accomplish our detention through underground means. Additionally, I know it's probably a little bit of a stretch, but with the basin here, because it is within the 450 feet of the terrestrial habitat, we wouldn't want a wood frog to hop along the property line and then get stuck in that basin.
Probably better than being smushed by a
Wouldn't
dump
want
truck.
that. I'm still gonna fixate for another couple of minutes on this erosion control pond to the, to the southwest, below the stone wall. Can you go to your phase 2 soil and erosion sediment control drawing?
Sure.
What number is that, Jim?
231.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're building this retaining wall now. You're 4 feet up in the air.
10.
Or how tall is this?
10.
10 feet. Okay, so you're starting to build this thing. You're up in the air. How does the water get to this temporary sediment trap?
That's kind of more when we first start disturbance. You first start cutting trees, you start stumping trees, you start preparing that pad area for that retaining wall. We need to make sure we have an area that can collect the runoff. and
Understood,
attenuate the-
understood. Okay, so that's in the phase one, but what happens when, I mean, I would just consider, I don't wanna drone on, but I would just consider, thinking about putting a limited disturbance up against the wall, putting a deeper detention pond in a low spot above the wall, right, with some sort of a way to discharge around the wall when you build it.
Okay,
And as the wall comes up, that way, the water comes in and you fill up the wall and I'm just,
you know, I think we can probably accomplish this actually, and what we can
because if
actually.
you're right, I'm gonna call you on every future development. If you build something and you don't have a detention basin below that wall, I'm gonna say, do you remember Monroe Recycling, where you told me you needed it below the wall?
Don't show them your hand, Jim.
You know, any construction site changes as construction progresses, right? We do our best to try to give contractors guidance. I definitely think it's important to have that at the lower elevation during the phase one.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you that probably during construction, as that wall starts to come up, we're not gonna have water running down there. So we can theoretically eliminate that as part of phase two. That basin will almost adapt as the wall is built. The problem is, we can't design an SEC plan that is based on each lift of the wall.
No, obviously.
Right? But what I could say is, we could probably incorporate some additional details here, because what's gonna end up happening, most likely, is that this wall is constructed, the low area where the detention basin is gonna go in its ultimate location, the underground detention, that's probably gonna end up acting as that sediment trap during the construction of the wall. So I think we can, I think you brought up a very good point. I think we can show, and actually, we even say that. Maintain sediment trap 2 until final grading of area, remove and dispose of sediment within basin prior to final grading. But we can eliminate that from phase 2, and we can provide some additional notations to say that, sediment trap needs to be maintained on the uphill side
I'll
of the
leave
wall.
it to your certified professional.
Got it. Okay.
How are they gonna get down there to do the planting and remove the sediment trap pond once their wall's built?
They'll be able to access it along this edge.
Oh, okay, there's a little room there.
Yeah, there's enough room to get down
And
around.
with those concrete galleries right close to the wall, how are you gonna prevent any bleed through?
Well,
Or is
so,
it not a concern?
it's less of a concern because of the type of wall that we're doing, the drainage is built behind the wall. So these walls, there's all kinds of different walls. You can have modular block, they have the geogrid reinforcement. We're choosing a wall type that can actually be constructed without the need for that lateral reinforcement. And then that incorporates drainage behind the wall. So we're comfortable we can construct this where we have it designed, and it won't have an impact because we can build the appropriate drainage that we need. And
I'm not talking
I don't
about
think
drainage
we,
for the wall, I'm not talking about drainage for the wall, I'm talking about the galleries, the storm retention galleries, what's gonna keep that from bleeding through the wall? It's so
well, we
close.
didn't, we have stone encasement below the wall. I'm not sure if we incorporated it, but we actually could incorporate a liner underneath that system as an additional
Between the two?
measure.
Between the two, you're saying?
Yeah, well, so these concrete, these retainage structures that we're doing, these concrete galleys, you can actually incorporate a liner system within it, or around the perimeter, excuse me, so that'll kind of keep that water in and prevent it from seeping through and seeping out the wall. But I think the wall itself will be designed and constructed.
Solid units.
Yeah, but if you have pervious material up against the wall, then you're right,
They're
pervious
draining out
material in the
Yeah.
thing, it's gonna just blow right through.
They're
It's not
draining
gonna
out,
leak right
they're
through. It's
draining
not
out the
gonna.
bottom.
Hmm?
They got a perforated pipe at the bottom, so it's a detention, it's not retention, so they can just use solid units. You got a good question, Keith. I got a question that wall at that point is like what, 8 to 10 feet high? You got the galleries right up against the back of it, that's a modular block wall, so you need like 8 to 10 feet of the structural
No,
grid?
it's not a modular block wall, it's a gravity block wall, so that doesn't actually have the geogrid reinforcement
Oh,
behind it.
okay, it's not the smaller
Right.
gra-
The smaller blocks,
But
like
the
the 8-inch blocks,
The last detail you gave me for that wall, the gravity block wall, that has a grid too. And if it does have a grid, the galleries are gonna be in the way.
no, you can do those gravity type systems without the geogrid reinforcement, they can be up to like 18 feet tall.
All right, so I'm just
The
remembering.
typical
last-
segmental block wall does, and that's typically the height of the wall is equal to the
Like the
length
one
of
you
the
did at one
reinforcement.
24, I believe, had the grid behind it.
I don't think so, because that was the recon wall from Connecticut Precast, and that doesn't require the lateral
I thought I
reinforcement.
remember, because that's one of the things that kind of threw me off, thinking that it was a small block. But I could be wrong.
You must be tapering to shorter up top, right? Because it disappears and you still have parking lot. You still have pavement, so the wall disappears after in the middle of the second bin. So the wall must be tapering down to 0, right?
Well, this bin will actually serve as a little bit of a wall. This bin wall will serve as a little bit of a wall as well. Because there's a little bit of a grade change from existing. We're trying to not disturb, provide too much
So the
disturbance.
gravity wall is the thicker gray line, right?
Correct.
And then when you get to the end of the detention basin, it goes thin. So is that because it's less of a drop? Less- less rolling back,
That's
less
because
material?
there'll be a retaining wall, that wall of that bin will serve as a retaining wall to, at a lower elevation, and then it'll be the bin itself.
I have some questions for Mr. McManus. Hi. Could you please explain your number series versus your A series wetlands? I've never,
It helps me write my reports.
Okay,
Instead
it
of
doesn't
doing,
help us reading them.
instead of ending at 35 and then you start in the northern wetland at 36, I just get more confused. So I rather do my numbered series is in the southern part of the site, my A series is in the northern part of the site. Say if there was something in the northeast side, that would be my B series.
okay, so it has nothing to do with
It has
quality.
nothing to do with anything. It has everything to do with
It's strictly a
nomenclature
numbering
and how I
system.
keep things organized.
Okay, good to know. How did you determine the different soil types? Did you do spade and auger?
Yeah.
Or did you do strictly mapping? Because it wasn't
Both.
mentioned in the,
Both. I used what the NRCS has mapped it as, and then I confirmed that through just doing my work in the delineations. I can tell from my till or outwash from disturbed soil. But it was a medium intensity, it wasn't a high intensity soil survey.
oh, and, I believe you said that the water that was gonna be coming from the recharge galleries would be starting at the top of the wetland and working its way through
Right.
down to the bottom part where the vernal pool is. Now, how does that works better, rather, when the entire wetland is not flooded,
It's not flooded.
when it's not flooded,
But
exactly.
the entire wetland is not flooded.
But it could be in heavy rainstorms in
No.
early spring.
The southern part is very flooded, as you've probably seen from your site visits. The northern part,
I haven't been on a site visit
okay.
yet. I'm
Well, the
actually
southern
going to
part
do it.
is flooded. The northern part is much less, it's more saturated during the spring and maybe late fall. It doesn't actually flood to you where you can't walk through. You cannot walk through the southern end, like during April,
During April, it does.
without
it
hip.
in
I don't know,
August?
I should go out and take a look, but it's a breeding pool. It's,
Mm-hmm.
water's there long enough. I
How
haven't been back
much-
to the site since April.
Right, okay. how much oil residue or any kind of VOC that might be in the escaped waters from anywhere, how much of that does it take to affect the health and welfare of the critters that live in a vernal pool or in a wetland?
I don't have the answer for that, but the reason why I had Kevin and his team put the discharge to the north, because I actually wanted the wetland to I wanted the runoff to come out of the level spreader and then go through the quote wooded swamp portion and let that wetland filter anything that's left behind prior to getting to where these critters are going to do most of their breeding. So that was the reasoning for discharging it to far to the north as I could get it, and they put it all the way up to the top.
And in your opinion, the wetland hydrology is duplicated by the proposed plan as is existing?
As talking with the engineers, I'm satisfied with what they told me.
And it was asked before, and I don't know if the answer was, but in the debris that's in the wetlands, is that proposed to be removed?
There's really no debris in the wetland itself, it's just along the wetland boundary in the uplands.
Okay, is that planned to be removed?
Yeah, the stuff that can be, yes. But like we said before, a fill pile that was there, that has mature trees, we're not planning on.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about like
tires, I have a picture of tires, that will be, but that's easy.
Right. Well,
And some of it is probably, some of the debris is probably going to be removed because it's inside the development area too,
well, that makes sense.
Yep.
Sure, absolutely.
including invasive species like autumn olive and all those kinds of things in the uplands.
I'm wondering if Jeff should see this.
Anything else from anybody else in the commission?
I have a question. So Kevin, you know, I refreshed myself by my memory here by looking at the plan, and your plan calls for a cast-in-place wall, which if that's the case, it eliminates that issue as far as the geogrid. But the runoff, I guess, is still
We were proposing,
sheet 3.01.
yeah.
Which may, you know, I don't know why that was probably chosen, I would guess, for that reason, and also the weight of all the trucks, and that's a lot of weight on there.
No, we're not proposing a cast-in-place wall in that location. We're proposing a gravity block type installation there.
That's somewhere else, or is that just an error?
I think that might be an error. We had a, yeah, I think that might be an error.
All right, so we need a detail of that.
Yep.
And I still think it's a good point in terms of, you know, how, you know, just give, I guess, a detail to see where that geogrid is needed. And then, the thought occurred to me, why are they perforated, just for stormwater recharge? I mean, that's a bonus, I guess.
Well,
Typically, it would be a bonus.
the system that we selected was this retain-it type system, which is, you know, we've worked with in the past. It's actually relatively easy to order. It does have perforations, so it actually comes pre-made with the perforations. I think what we've done in the past in other projects, we've actually just incorporated a liner around
Yeah,
the
you-
perimeter.
You do have a liner specified, a geosynthetic around your perimeter you have here.
Yeah, but that's,
That's not an
that's
impervious.
different than what I'm talking about as an impervious
All
liner.
right.
So what I'm gonna what I'll do is we'll, you know, I recommend we incorporate an impervious line around the perimeter of that basin to ensure there's no issues there. But we are proposing a block wall, not a cast-in-place wall.
So, detail for that.
It actually will just be we'll just be modifying our retained detail that's shown, and it'll just have an additional call-out that says install impervious line around the perimeter.
One of the other things I noticed in these plans, you incorporated seeps through the wall. Could you explain how they work?
Sure, so as those block walls are constructed, we put a drainage layer behind those walls, so it's 3/4 inch stone or clean stone. Those weeps or seeps essentially allow for, as water gets behind the wall, it can seep out from the wall and not create an issue with, you know, water getting or undermining the foundation for those walls or anything like that.
So is that a little riprap pad or something you have at the base? There's little squares. I want to know what those squares delineate.
What sheet are you looking at?
Depicted. I am on 2.31. I'm assuming that's what the little seep weeps, whatever they are.
What sheet are you on?
On 2.31, just to west of the wall.
Yep,
Those blocks are little, I asked for some riprap stabilization.
he wanted those underneath the
He
weeps.
wanted.
Or Scott requested that we incorporate some riprap stabilization at the base of those, so yes, that's what that is.
Stabilization for the seeps, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I knew it. So it's, what, it's channeled to certain areas so that
It's like a
can
little
come
piece of
down to them?
PVC pipe, that's all it is, it's a little piece of PVC pipe so that if any water accumulates, it has an outlet, so there's no flow coming through there, we're just simply providing a little riprap base at the bottom so that, you know, we can
I'd
make
be
sure it
more
doesn't.
like small surge stones.
Yeah, 1.25 inch stone, something like that, yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so, just to clarify, we were talking about shortening up the LOD around the bottom of the area behind the wall. Could it be brought up to, I'm still on 2.31, you can see the outline of what I guess we're calling the path. Could the LOD be brought up that far?
Yeah, I think we can. So there's a kind of like that path in there almost. Unless there's some, you know, we have some landscaping down there, but
Talking in here, right?
Yeah,
yeah, I think we can
Just like that
accommodate
corner
that.
of-
I mean, we have some plantings kind of down grading from that, just to fill in that area. If you go to our landscape plan, you can just kind of see, we do have some additional stuff down here, but we can probably,
well, is that stuff that's down there going to replace what you'd be taking out? Or is there nothing there now?
I think that area, it's kind of nothing there. Yeah, you can see that the existing tree line follows this location here. So there's actually nothing down in this corner, and this tree line for this wetland is here. So this is open. So we were
Open, when you
actually-
say nothing,
There's probably scrub and
Stuff, I mean, bigger trees are on the sides.
right.
well, how
And
about
then
brush?
there's an open, if I recall, as we go out there today, it's probably loaded, but as I recall, that path was pretty accessible. You could walk it. I don't know if you could drive anything down there these days, but.
Well, this
it
wouldn't be.
wasn't-
the
I'm sure they
path
did at some
itself.
point.
This is
You
below
could
the
see
path.
it, you could walk it, it was visible, wasn't overgrown. It wasn't just a line on an old map that showed an old road and you can't find, it's there.
Oh, I believe that, but
Yeah,
I'm
no,
just
I'm just
talking
saying, you
about
can
off
see
the
it.
side of the road, so I'm,
Yeah.
if there's established, healthy, and non-invasive, greenery already there, you know,
Right.
why recreate the wheel?
Exactly.
And leave it there. Yeah, but they'd be pulling out a variety of stuff to put in a tree. Do You get the point? I don't know, I like to preserve what we have, because it never is the same as what nature had there in the first place.
I think we can certainly pull that back, and we can eliminate any landscaping that we were proposing. We can adjust our landscape plan accordingly.
Okay, adjust the landscape appropriately,
Some of
that
it
would
can
be
be
good, so.
readjust. It's hard to do it here, but out in the field, when you actually have a plan and maybe a stake showing exactly where things are gonna lie,
Mhm.
then you can readjust LED lines or readjust things. So you're actually sitting and like, okay, we have a nice oak here, let's leave that alone, and let's move our LED line over here. It's hard to do it here in the 8:30 at night. With some of these lines, where do you put the line, you know?
And who prepared the landscaping plan?
Doug Rich, licensed landscape architect in my office.
Okay.
Actually, and I think he, in coordination with Jim in terms of some of like the upland plantings and things like that.
Okay, all right, I have nothing more.
Okay. That's it for the commission. Scott, you good?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I'll open up for public comment, or do you want to do exhibits first?
Oh, wait, one last thing, before the public comment, just the bond recommendations for 24 Dock.
Okay. So I will open up for public comment. Or you want to do it? Do we do exhibits first or public?
Doesn't
Any members of the public here today want to speak in opposition? Seeing none. In support? None. Of a general nature? None. Okay, if you would please read the exhibits into the record, I'd appreciate it.
Exhibit 1 was notification to the Department of Health and Clarion with mailing receipts from Doug Rich, dated May 8th. Exhibit 2 were photos of the sign posted at the property. Exhibit 3 was the bond estimate form, dated May 8th, revised May 21st. Exhibit 4 was engineering review comments, dated May 21st. Exhibit 5 was an engineering report by Solely Engineering, dated May 8th, revision date June 5th. Exhibit 6 was a map set titled Monroe Recycling and Aggregate, dated May 8th, revision date June 5th. Exhibit 7 is a site investigation and impact analysis by J&M Wetland Consulting Services, document dated May 8th, 2018. Exhibit 8 is the response to the town engineer's comments by Casey Birch, Solely Engineering, document dated June 5th, 2018. Exhibit 9 was notification to the State Health Department with mailing receipts by Solely Engineering. The document was dated May 8th. Exhibit 10 is notification to Aquarian with mailing certificates. Document was dated May 8th. Exhibit 11 were Health Department comments by Rich Jackson, dated May 2018. Exhibit 12 were updated town engineering comments, dated May 21st, revision date June 12, 2018. Exhibit 13 were updated map set by Solely Engineering, dated May 8th, revision date June 20th. Exhibit 14 was an updated engineering report by Solely Engineering, dated May 8th, revision date June 20th. Exhibit 15 is updated comments, response to engineering comments by Solely Engineering, Casey Birch, document dated June 20th. Exhibit 16 were updated town engineer comments. The document was dated May 21st, revision date June 25th, and that is it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anything else from the applicant?
Just in summation, we're here tonight to talk about a proposed facility at 45 Pepper Street. I think we've gone through the presentation in detail. I think there was a really good pointed discussion regarding some of the additional measures we can incorporate. I think we'd be happy to agree to those as part of conditions of approval. We talked about making sure that there's considerable maintenance plan, which is actually incorporated on the plans already. Suggestions of having a sweeper on the site, additional catch basin inserts in some specific locations, incorporating a liner for the detention system. But I think, ultimately, I think we've prepared a good plan. We've developed and designed all the best management practices that we could to provide sufficient protection to the wetlands and the vernal pool resource, and ultimately that our project will not have an adverse impact.
Thank you very much. All right, I will consider this hearing closed. All right, moving right along to our next public hearing of the night, IWC 2018-07, 205 Monroe Turnpike, proposed reconfiguration of two existing lots. Lot 1, proposed retail space. Lot 2, proposed multi-use. What happened? What did I do?
Oh, you didn't do anything. I got confused.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'll go back now. All right, 205 Monroe Turnpike, proposed reconfiguration of two existing lots. Lot 1, proposed retail space. Lot 2, proposed multi-use retail, restaurant, and medical. 205 Monroe Turnpike LLC. Louis Regina, member. Applicant Ray Riggio, representative. And Solely Engineering LLC, engineer. This is the opening of the hearing.
Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Raymond Rizzio. Happy to be before you tonight.
Good evening.
And I'm representing 205 Monroe Turnpike LLC. For the property 205 Monroe Turnpike, if you know it, it's as you're coming north on the Monroe Turnpike. It's on the left-hand side. It's about an 8.5 acre piece of property, and we would like to develop it into a nice mixed-use kind of shopping center with office retail. We're planning approximately 17,000 square feet of retail, 10,000 square feet of medical, 5,000 square foot restaurant, and a 4,200 square foot convenience store / gas station in your LOR district, mid-office district. The property contains about 0.19 of wetlands. The wetlands are not attached. They're not a water course. They are wetlands that we have done the best we can to make sure we don't touch. There's no filling of any wetlands, yet we have about 1.74 acres of in the upland review. Let me move ahead and just show you really quickly now. I'll solely take you through the engineering, and I've got Bill Kenny here, but this is the site. As you can see, it's directly north of DR Charles. There's a contractor yard. Property, as you know, was built relatively flat. There is two small pockets of wetlands. Hold on 1 second. All that's going to happen with me with this thing is trouble. There's one of the pockets, and this is, in effect, our site plan. There'll be an entrance on Monroe Turnpike, in and out, and then an exit off the area, which will be the convenience store and the gas station. The project has two small areas of wetlands, one here. We don't propose filling it. We do have some excavation and some work that's going to be done in the upland review, which Mr. Solly will take you through. So this area up front, it will be a separate lot. Will be a gas station with a convenience store. We have a nice 5,000 square foot restaurant space here. We have, I think it's 17,000 square foot retail strip here, and 10,000 square foot of medical office in the rear. We have adequate buffering. We're not requiring, I know this is all, some of it's zoning, but just as a way of, this is all in accordance with the regulations. We have more than sufficient parking, and we have the adequate buffering required around all the residential areas. These are the piece of properties that back up on Spring Hill Road. As I said, what I'll do is, we've been through the comments from engineering department. We've taken a lot of time. We'll have Kevin Soley come up and take you through the engineering portion of it, and then Bill Kenny, who is our soil scientist, will take you through our wetlands review. We have a detailed landscape plan and a detailed improvement plan, which I'll have Kevin address. ready, Kevin?
I am.
Here we go.
I'm ready to go.
Oh, one minor mailings.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ray. Again, just to orient everybody, I know Ray covered some of this, but just the town of Monroe. So the site's just north of the town line of the town of Trumbull. Route 111 runs north-south here. The site is 205 Monroe Turnpike. So the town line is approximately right around here. We got DR Charles. We've got the Home Depot in Trumbull. Route 25 intersection with 111 is here. As Ray indicated, the subject site is 8.5 acres. The lot configuration is changed over the years, but we're actually eligible for first cut, so there's going to be 2 properties, 2 lots. Lot 1 is approximately 1.55 acres, and then Lot 2 is 6.97 acres. As Ray indicated, there are 2 very small wetland pockets on the property, approximately 0.19 acres. There's a little larger wetland area here, and a very small pocket in the southwest corner of the site here. Now, we did receive comments from Scott. We got them a little bit. We didn't have an opportunity to go through 2 rounds like we did for the previous application, so we did not actually provide, and I did not want to dump on your lap a full set of revised plans in response to comments. What I'm going to present to you this evening actually does reflect a lot of modifications that have been made in response to Scott's comments, but we haven't actually issued you a formal response letter yet or revised plans. Some of those comments we've gone through with Bill, we've gone through with our plans. I'm going to touch on some of those changes that we made, but we will likely have to provide a formal submission for the revisions based on the comments from Scott that we did just recently receive. So we're proposing, as Ray indicated, a project that we're actually very proud of and I think is going to be a really great addition to the town of Monroe. Lot 1 is proposed to include a proposed Noble Gas gas station convenience facility with 5 fueling pumps with a covered canopy, so kind of 10 fueling stations, and a 4,200 square foot convenience store. This convenience store will have a drive-through component to it. The access to Lot 1 will be provided through a shared access in the center of the property, which we are proposing to be signalized as part of this development, and it will provide an additional right-out exit onto Route 111. Lot 2, as part of this, Lot 2 will be proposed to include a just under 5,000 square foot restaurant with 68 parking spaces, a 17,500 square foot mixed-use retail building towards the rear with 103 parking spaces, and then a medical office building, a 10,000 square foot medical office building with 88 parking spaces. Now, you may not be able to tell just by looking, but one of the things that we've actually done is we wanted to really increase and maximize the buffer around this existing wetland pocket to the maximum extent we could. So this plan actually reflects a reduction in parking immediately in front of this corner of the building, so we could really pull this wall back and really kind of maximize some of that buffer area. This was, in conversations with Bill, and reviewing Scott's comments, we wanted to make sure that we were improving that a little bit. So we're proud that we were able to accomplish that. From a grading drainage standpoint, our site's been designed in accordance with the 2004 Water Quality Manual as provided by DEEP. The site does have some topography, as you guys are probably aware. You've driven by, you can see the condition of the property. It's at Route 111, it's a lower elevation, and the elevation does climb up as you go towards the rear of the property. We've designed our site to kind of capitalize on and work within the constraints of the land. So we do have a driveway that kind of slopes up. We do have some cut towards the rear of the site here, but we have been able to design it in accordance with the applicable standards. We do have a couple small retaining walls, a very small wall on this location here, and we have a little bit of a larger wall. This is a fill wall, retaining wall, so this is a little bit higher up. This keeps the parking area up elevated from the existing grade around the lower wetlands. Each lot has been designed to ensure that we maintain existing drainage patterns. One of the additional plans that we have, which we'll submit, is Scott was looking for some additional detail in terms of what's happening here, how this drainage pattern is happening. Essentially, the majority of the water actually bypasses this wetland and kind of continues along this location here. So what we've done is we wanted to make sure that our drainage system was designed so we were actually matching the flows and the similar watersheds that are contributing to the wetland areas. So as these lots are being developed as part of a joint site plan application, we have some cross-access easements, not only for access but also for drainage. So the Noble Gas facility is designed with an underground detention system in this location here, which is going to attenuate the increase in runoff from the change of pervious surface from existing to proposed conditions. The proposed restaurant is also equipped with a detention system here, which again is designed to attenuate the increase in runoff. These actually connect into the same system, which in both of these systems are designed with pre-treatment through a hydrodynamic separator to make sure that we're removing the total suspended solids in accordance with deep requirements. These systems kind of join together and then discharge at this location here, which actually mimics and mirrors the same drainage pattern that currently exists for the majority of the water, which kind of comes down here and then drains back this way. The two retail buildings towards the rear of the property, these have both been designed, again, with underground detention systems in this location here and this location here. And these have actually been, this system itself, actually, per some of Scott's comments, we actually increased the size slightly to ensure that we were attenuating and making sure that we were not increasing the flow or the amount of water that's contributing to this wetland area here. So we did attenuate that in this location. Actually, this system too actually connects into this lower system as well. Some of Scott's comments we'll kind of touch on as we go through the process. Both of these will allow for some additional recharge, groundwater recharge as well. These systems are located, the bottom of the systems are located above groundwater elevation based on our investigations done to date, but we are proposing a liner system for both of these two based on some concerns that Scott had indicated. So again, our overall system has been designed to ensure that we are matching existing rates of runoff, and we're not going to create any kind of impact to the surrounding drainage area, and we're also matching flow patterns to the existing wetlands. From a soil erosion sediment control standpoint, we have a multi-phased approach. It includes locations for sediment traps, silt fence with and areas for stockpiles, et cetera. From a utility standpoint, we're proposing to provide underground utilities from Route 111, proposed water main which will enter the property and provide access to both fire and domestic to all the proposed buildings. We're proposing underground electric service. Gas is available for the property, and telephone, cable, et cetera. Those are all going to be proposed to be underground. We've done all of our septic system testing with the Rich Jackson of the Monroe Health Department, and our septic systems have been designed in accordance with the Department of Public Health Code. The system for the small convenience store is located in this location here in the parking lot. The restaurant has a system which should actually be pumped up into the existing hill here. This retail building has a small system here, and the medical office building has a system in this location here. So those have all been designed in accordance with health department requirements, and the sanitarian has observed and concurred with all of our findings regarding septic. We have an extensive landscaping plan. Obviously, we're excited about this project because it really does kind of serve as the gateway into Monroe. And once you pass over that town line, right now, it takes a little while before you get to development. The Goodwill, well, there's some smaller office developments and things like that, but the Goodwill on the east side of the road, Walgreens, the post office, but we feel this is really going to be a great entrance to the town, and we wanted to make sure that we were designing it accordingly. One of the things that we've incorporated is there are some stone walls on the property. We're actually collecting those. We're going to be proposing stone walls along the property frontage. We have some ground signage proposed at the driveway, and again, we are proposing to signalize the intersection. We have a robust planting plan along the front and providing extensive buffers around the perimeter. And we've also, in working with Bill, provided some pretty substantive buffer plantings around the wetlands themselves. I think with that, I'll actually invite Bill up to talk a little bit about the existing wetlands and what we've incorporated in terms of some of his comments and some planting we're proposing around those wetland areas. So we got this, and then where's the aerial?
Good evening, I'm Bill Kenny, the principal of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield. I am a professional wetland scientist and soil scientist. I was involved with the mapping of the wetlands on this property almost exactly 4 years ago, June of 2014, and then retained again this past year to help with putting together the development plan for this and helping to ensure that the wetlands were not impacted with the proposed plan. As part of that, I did revisit the property and looked at the wetlands and confirmed that their boundaries, I didn't find any changes with regard to that. And then we did an assessment of the wetland areas. There are the two areas that have been discussed. These areas are moderate in function and quality. They're gently sloping areas. If you look on the survey, property survey, anyway, there's our it slopes relatively steeply through here, and then it gets more level in this area. It's still sloping, but over time, you have discharge of groundwater coming out on that upper slope. And since the last glacier, what happened is that the upper layers of the soil filled in with fine particles of sediment from that discharge, and then slowly formed a wetland over time in that area. So it does not have any critical significant habitats such as vernal pools or anything like that. Being that it's gently sloping, it's on the drier end of wetlands, so it has a groundwater discharge, but the habitat within the wetland itself isn't substantially different than a lot of the wetland immediately adjacent to it. There's some shallow ponding in areas, but 6 inches or less and for short periods of time. And then water leaves this but infiltrates into the ground beyond it in areas where the soil hasn't been clogged through sediment deposit, because the wetland, it's in the wetland itself, that sediment, and makes its way onto the property to the southeast. And this very small area extends off the property to the south and southeast as well. So it has it's a red maple forest, typical species that you would find in the red maple wetland, as well as some invasive plants, but primarily native plants in the wetland forest. The proposed conditions, there are no activities proposed within the wetland, either during construction or after construction, so there are no direct impacts to the wetland. Then we looked at indirect impacts that are primarily from water, and you would typically, or they would be from water, so the management of stormwater is critical, the management of sanitary discharges are critical to help protect that wetland. So as has been discussed, this septic system has been designed in accordance with state standards, which have been developed to help protect the waters of the state and of the town. Also, the stormwater management system, both during construction with soil erosion and sediment control measures, and after construction with measures to control peak discharge as well as water quality for stormwater, have been designed in accordance with those state standards, and similar to sanitary or health department standards, the standards of the 2004 Water Quality Manual and the Erosion and Sediment Control Manuals of the state are designed to protect the waters and wetlands of the state. For example, with the standards that they've set up, removing 80% of total suspended solids and other nutrients and petroleum products and so forth, that if you design in accordance with those standards, then you're going to be able to protect the wetlands and watercourses. So we worked with Kevin Soley's office to look at those features, the stormwater management features, and we find that based on the erosion sediment controls that are proposed and the detention system and water quality treatment system, that adverse impacts will be avoided from stormwater runoff to these wetland systems. In order to help ensure that, we did recommend that they increase the buffer around the wetland. So the plan that was originally submitted to you, they've increased the buffer slightly around the wetland to help ensure that they would protect those wetland areas. And lastly, where there is temporary disturbance, they're proposing to install native plants. You have the proposed retaining wall, and then between that wall and the wetlands, there's a substantial amount of native trees, shrubs, and ground covers that are being proposed to restore a natural habitat in that area. The wall and fence on top of the wall will provide an excellent demarcation feature to keep activities, the development activities on the development side of the wall and the natural area protected on the other side of the wall. As I mentioned when I started, a primary water source for the wetland is groundwater discharge. So the discussion that Kevin had about how the stormwater is being managed and groundwater being infiltrated back into water being infiltrated back into the ground with the infiltration systems, as well as the level spreader that is proposed just uphill of the wetland. So the water will be captured here, will be treated, go through the subsurface detention system and infiltration system here, and then the water will come out through the pipe into a level spreader here, and that water will slowly make its way back to the wetland as it would under the natural conditions that exist, replicating those existing conditions and ensure that that wetland continues to function as it does today.
So 100% of the water that comes off the roof of these buildings and all the parking lots all go into these infiltrators?
All the stormwater is collected and routed through the underground detention system to ensure that we're not increasing the rate of runoff. Oftentimes, the water that comes off the roof of these structures is considered clean, so we can actually discharge that directly into those systems and not have to route those through the hydrodynamic separators, because they aren't susceptible to that same sediment which happens in parking lots, dirt falling off of tires, stuff like that. So that water is considered clean. That can go directly into those basins. And then all the driveway or the parking lot drainage is collected through our catch basins and run through our treatment train with deep sumps through our mechanical separator or hydrodynamic separator, and then into the system itself.
The nice part about this project is one of the things in breaking it up into phases into multiple buildings would have allowed us to not just end up with one large building with one large field of parking. So the buildings are interspersed, which allows for good mixed use of the property, allows us to buffer the residential components, so that basically when you look at the first, your overhead, go back to the first, you'll see it from the aerial that basically you do a lot of residential area, but as you can see, no house will basically see this. The buffering is basically kept in place. We managed to, not we, I'm not, I like to take credit for everything when I can, but the engineers did an excellent job of basically developing this around the wetlands so that it doesn't look just like a big, Home Depot-like field of parking. And then when you add in the different landscaping, basically the different pockets, you get the feeling more of a small village than just a large shopping center with a field of asphalt. So that the wetlands actually gives us some contours. And then Phil Kenny and I think working with Scott looked up for us to increase the buffering off our plan, so that we lost a few parking spaces, but we still have more than enough parking to satisfy the zoning regulations. yet enough to give us a buffer from the wetlands, and then physical demarcation by way of fencing and walls. So the wetlands are protected, you don't have to worry about anybody wandering into there. It's a big improvement from the contractor yard to the south, yet we still manage to buffer all the residential areas and not disturb the wetlands in any manner. So for all these reasons, we feel really good about the project, and I think it fits in very nicely with the town, that it's not just a 40,000 square foot straight shopping center sitting across as you enter the town. It still gives you the feeling of a little bit of a mixed-use village. And that, with the placement of the wetlands and the landscaping, we think is a quite attractive project.
Yep. One of the things that we actually wanted to focus on is that pedestrian connectivity, like Ray indicated. So what we've actually done is, in addition to incorporating sidewalk across the property frontage, we've incorporated sidewalks kind of from each individual development area. So while I stated we were dealing with some grading constraints and some considerations, so for example, this restaurant pad is a little bit lower in elevation than this, we still maintained and provided, sidewalks coming along the main entrance, providing connectivity through here, and even providing connectivity from the upper elevation development, so that we have a sidewalk across, we have a set of stairs here, so you can actually still get down to this restaurant and have that cross access between these various areas. Even though we have some grading considerations, we've still been able to design the site to accommodate cross access between these, because that was an important component of what we wanted to do from a design standpoint.
There going to be a lot of material being brought in or brought out?
I think it's pretty much balanced.
We do have some export. We did obviously, we did our best to minimize the overall earthwork operations to the maximum extent practical. I do believe there's, I don't have it actually in front of me. I think there may be a little bit of an export. Unfortunately, I don't have that in front of me though. But we were as close to balance as we could.
Really important things, as you know, especially on 111, even though it's not a wetlands issue, is the light was important. As you know, with regard to, we'll be adding a light, which should help everybody along Monroe Turnpike, and then also more than adequate parking. Because some people say, well, maybe we actually have a little more than, we have probably 20 spots more than we need by zoning, but since there is no on-street parking, you certainly want to make sure, given as you've seen some of the other projects to the south of us, you want to make sure that there is never an issue with anybody needing any excess parking. So, like I said, it's a great balancing act of buffer, landscape, protecting the wetlands, yet providing enough size to make the project worthwhile, yet making sure that it's adequately parked. I think all of Scott's comments, I think, were addressed in your revised plans, which will be submitted, correct?
Yeah, well, what we wanted to do was, we wanted to obviously present the project that we have. This shows some changes from the plans that are in front of you. We wanted to solicit any other comments or feedback from the commission, and then what we'll do is we'll provide a formal response to Scott's comments, and we'll incorporate any other discussions here this evening.
Which I thought were all comments we could address very easily. I've been on the other side of some of Scott's comments that are, that there's just, there were no "are you kidding" comments, which we wanted to say.
Yeah, we actually did the response, we updated our analysis, we haven't provided to you yet, but a lot of things we were looking for, kinds of concentration, CN values, things like that. We've been able to incorporate all that.
Yeah, I mean, I saw that some of the stuff has been revised for P and Z, because I already did most of that review. So you have a revision for, it got revised after I reviewed this.
Right.
And then went to P and Z, so my comments are a little different. I saw that you changed some of the stuff.
Yeah, and what I've learned by working with this commission, and really every commission, is nobody likes to get a big set of plans dumped on you the night of the hearing. So I didn't want to do that to you guys. So since we didn't have it in advance of last Wednesday, I wanted to make sure that we could talk through it, and then we'll give you a formal revised package. So.
Thank you.
So that's a retaining wall around that wetland, right, is what you said? How tall is it?
It actually, it did get a little bit taller as part of our redesign, because we were trying to reduce some of the impact around that, in that upland review area. I think at its max height, it's about 10 feet tall,
How many?
10 feet.
What's on top of it?
Chain link fence, guide rail, and then the parking area.
Yeah, what we did was we pushed it back, which gained some height, and lost a couple parking spaces. One of Bill Kenny's recommendation was to get as big a buffer from the wetlands as we could. So rather than, original design was probably what, 12 to 15 feet?
No, it was shorter because, so this is higher. So,
Right, no,
so-
but I'm saying, no, I meant
Oh,
buffer from the wetlands.
correct.
We
Yeah.
gained an additional 5 to 10 feet of
Yeah, probably about 10
buffer
feet.
by increasing the size of the wall. So
And
it's
then
either
it's chain link on top,
Walls segmented.
and then it looks like you stuffed this lot pretty much to the gills. What do you do with all the snow?
Dump it in the wetlands.
We do have some areas that can accommodate some snow storage or some area, you know, obviously around the perimeter. We've created some buffers around the perimeter of the parking area. There's some snow storage here. We have some snow storage over in this area. We've kind of dealt with that on an individual lot basis. There's area for snow storage here, snow storage here. So we've taken that into consideration, and then obviously, as with any commercial center, if we have massive storms, they'll have to deal with that and take it off-site as you do in any other commercial
But
operation.
to eliminate a plow contractor shoving snow over into that wetland, there's a chain link fence
There's a
Yes.
chain link fence and a guide.
and a guide.
Is, sorry,
No, go ahead.
the end of the wall, I am on sheet 211. On the end of the wall, that's the closest to the small wetland in the corner. How tall is that wall?
The end of the wall is 0 feet, because it tapers down.
Oh, is this one of
to-
those that
Yeah, it
works
it
its way
tapers.
down the hill?
Yep, it tapers down to 0, so we have, you can see we're grading up, we're grading up from here, so this is a wall, we're keeping our grading only on our side, so again, you know, in the plans in front of you, you probably actually see a lot of grading on the downhill side of that wall, especially through here, because we were trying to reduce the height, so we were trying to fill a little bit on the bottom, you know, cut the overall height of the wall. As part of this revision, we've actually eliminated a lot of that disturbance along the base, so that we're only trying to, you know, establish the lower elevation based on existing grades and then build up from there. So we do have a slope off this edge of the parking area, but it does taper down to match existing grade, and essentially that wall will taper down to 0. And I do apologize, I know you guys are looking at drawings that are different than what's up on the screen, which is,
So, yeah, I'm trying to find the same one, or the approximate same one that you've got there.
that'd be 2.21.
You're right, it is. Does, here we go again, does the LOD around that small wetland have to be as large as it is?
Well, I think actually in our revised plan, we actually reduced it.
Okay.
And you'll see
To,
that in the thing we submit. Yeah, because we're basically trying to mimic the base of that wall.
Oh, that's right, yeah, because you're removing all that grading on that side.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Is there any of these plans that show where the roof and footing drains go?
All of the plans accommodate or show where the roof drainage goes.
Why can't I find
We
it?
typically, well, so you can see right here, right? So there's a connection from this building into this system, so that's gonna be the roof drains themselves will go down gutter systems, collected in the header system, and that'll be directed into one of the underground detention systems. So you can see this building here has a line coming into this system, this building here has a line coming into this system, this building, we should be showing it somewhere coming into here, or it might be going to the catch basin.
Okay, is
Same
this
thing with
221?
Yes,
On-
the grading
is
drainage
that-
plan.
Okay, because that's not on our 221. So that's why I was, there's no footing or roof drains. That's why I was asking the questions. Each building has its own septic system?
Yes.
The reserves
And again,
depicted?
Yep, in accordance with health department requirements. So for the restaurant, it's a little larger system, so here's the primary system, the reserve is shown as a dashed line.
Okay.
Same for gas convenience store, primary, reserve, primary, reserve, primary, and reserve.
Okay.
The subsurface detention system, both of them on, for the medical building and the strip mall there, they're above the wall, right? And
That-
it's a interlocking block retaining wall,
Correct.
so it's gonna be sinking down in the ground there, through the wall, salts and stuff like that, right into the wetlands.
Well, actually, so one of the things about you're saying that the stormwater that's going to be going into those systems is going to seep through the ground with salt that's going to impact the wetlands?
Well, I'm figuring it's gonna go through that wall.
Well, so one of the things is, as we're doing this wall construction, right? So as we're building any wall, you have a drainage medium behind the wall, and then you have additional backfill behind that. And then, so what we're gonna do is, as we build these systems, we can ensure that we have positive free draining materials beneath those systems that are installed structurally, so water will go into those systems and then seep downward. And as we do the backfill for the wall themselves, we can do something, we can do our, free draining material immediately behind the wall, but then we can actually do something with a little bit of higher fine content that's still gonna be structurally sound, so you're not gonna have water going, traveling laterally through here, because it's gonna have better free draining material to go right down. So it's not gonna wanna travel horizontally, it's just gonna go with gravity.
So that, like the bottom of those systems, how high would they be in comparison to the level of the wetlands?
The
5
bottom
feet
of
above.
those basins versus the wetland grades? So for example, for this system here, the bottom of those stone elevations is 446, and the wetlands are at elevation let's see. So this is at 446, this invert is at 441, and this is draining above the wetland, so this is, we're at least 5 feet above the bottom of that system to the top of the wetland. This system here, we're at, the bottom, it's 447, so it's a little bit higher here, but there's, 6 or 7 feet between the bottom of that system and the wetland elevation. So again, as we're constructing those systems and any of the fill material that goes in here, we can make sure that's free draining, so it's gonna go down, back recharge again, any of that recharge that does happen. And our analysis has been designed not to take that into consideration. We haven't designed it based on we're gonna have exfiltration to reduce the size. We're designing this under the assumption that, we'll put this in so we can have that groundwater recharge, but they're still designed so that we're assuming that none of that actually happens, so it's conservative.
On the detail sheet, I noticed that some of your detention is in metal galleries, and some is in plastic. Is there a difference in
So
one?
they're actually, some are in concrete and some are in plastic?
No, metal and plastic.
Which sheet?
Oh, you don't know.
It's these
I saw it somewhere.
different plans.
Having to do, yeah, it makes life change.
You didn't introduce the concrete to your neighbor revision.
That's true, that's right, yeah, we actually, so these systems may have been shown previously as pipe, and we actually, based on the volume that was going to it, we wanted to reduce that overall footprint, so it may not be in your plan set, but these have actually been redesigned to be a series of concrete galleys.
Oh, so they were, when you say pipe, metal pipe or plastic pipe?
Metal pipe.
Metal pipe.
Right, so these were, initially, when we first went through this exercise, these were underground detention through a series of metal pipes, and we revised that to be concrete galleys. Thank you, Scott, I actually forgot we've gone through this.
I remembered because I had to redo the whole thing. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just curious as to why there would be two different types, and I wish I remember where I saw it.
Well, I mean, even now, so we are still proposing two different types. These two systems are concrete galleys. These two systems are arch plastic chambers, and it's really based
Okay, well,
on
that explains it.
it's really based on where they are, the footprint that we have, the storage volume required. So it's really an engineering exercise of what's the appropriate product for this specific issue or installation. So that's why we do have some alternating products, and it's really just based on site constraints and requirements.
Okay. Okay, this next question is from Mr. Kenny. I notice on the overall pictorial view that this tiny little corner here is part of a larger system, which appears to be completely untreed in the picture. Does that have any possibility of being a vernal pool? If you look at that corner, you
Off-site?
see that there's an area of pond right below, right next to that. There's no trees in it whatsoever, and that's fully green, so that means that's past spring, most likely into summer, and it's got water in it. What's the chance, did you check that for it to be a vernal pool?
I didn't go off-site to look at that spot, but I know that it is forested. I don't think that is ponded. Are you going by the shadow?
I'm going strictly by what I see on the picture.
Right, I think that's shadows, larger tree right here on the corner that gets a lot of sun because of the exposure here, and that's just a shadow similar to the shadows that you have here, where these trees
I
remain.
don't think there's any ponds there.
Well, wetlands don't typically end directly at the edge
It
of
does.
the border,
It-
so,
I agree, it goes off-site, and actually, that was something I just pointed out this week, that the surveyor, that's a typo drafting error, this line should not be here. The stone wall is right here, so when I flagged this, I thought I was on the property line. Apparently, the stone wall is offset from the property line slightly. So I placed one flag, second flag, and a third flag with the wetland is coming off the site this way. So this line should not be here. The wetland does extend off the site this way. If you look
well,
at
I'm
my...
more concerned about it going toward the west.
Sure. So that is, I did look over there. I can't recall all the details right now, but I don't think that's a vernal pool. We can go back and check that for sure. I really think it's the shadow from a larger tree that's on the edge here and growing taller than some of the trees behind it that it shades out, that casts shade on. Definitely, I had a boundary here.
That's where the stone wall is actually on that side.
Yeah.
It's very similar, if you look up to the top of the property where you'll see, this up here. And there's a bunch of shading spots up here that are, that come off the trees. We don't remember that there's any kind of ponding.
Well, could we confirm that for next time, since we have to wait, I believe we have to keep the hearing open to receive the new material anyway. So can we confirm that?
Yes. In fact, you can put it in your written comments back.
Absolutely.
We'll
You can see the stone wall that runs along this edge right here. If you look at the survey in your package, the contours are easier to see. But you'll see that wall and how this edge of the wetland, there is a boundary to the wetland here, and that it's upland to the left of that. Again, this boundary should not be drafted that way.
Yes, I see that. I see that.
We'll confirm it when we have with our written response.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Kevin, in the plan I'm looking at, which is the older one, the drainage system in the middle in front of the retail section, there is a good amount of space between where those are, I believe are concrete gutters or those pipes.
Those were pipes in the
Looks like
plan.
there was a good amount of distance between there and the retaining wall, which would have helped to, keep seepage out. And now in that plan now, it looks like it's quite a bit closer, which was Ross's comment.
Yep.
Maybe there's a little reconfiguration to slide them over?
Absolutely, yeah, we can, again, the geogrid length is generally consistent with the height of the wall. That's kind of the rule of thumb. So if it's a 10-foot wall, it's 10-foot reinforcement behind it. I think we can certainly look at maybe playing with this configuration. Some of the challenges here, because we have separation between drainage basins and septic systems and things like that, so it is a little bit of a puzzle, but we can certainly probably reconfigure this. Part of these systems also changed in size a lot based on some of Scott's comments, how we wanted them, how he requested that we change. you know, some of our curve numbers and things like that. So, but I definitely think we can probably,
Could you run that more horizontally?
yeah, we can play with this
Which will pull
configuration
you
to
away.
make sure that we
Is
can
that
get
what you're looking
additional
for?
Off in
separation.
the middle, away from the
Yep.
septic.
Yeah, we can, yeah,
More parallel to building,
Yes.
building or
No.
something.
absolutely.
Also, in the areas of the septic system reserves that are in the upland area, are any of them in there? Maybe they're not.
No, none of our septic systems are in the upland review area. So this is the limit of the upland review area. This is our primary and reserve, so we have a good separation here.
Right. That one is close.
This continues this way, and this septic system is actually outside of it. It's here, and that reserve is just outside of it. And we can actually probably push this down this way too, but
That
both
doesn't-
primary,
My question is whether they're gonna put the reserves in and leave them versus disturbing again if they had to.
we would, well, what we would do for the reserves is we'd certainly install any, you know, manufactured select fill that would be required, but we typically don't install like the galleys or the systems themselves, just because it's an added cost and it's
Yeah.
oftentimes not necessary, but we would want to incorporate, you know, any select fill, things like that, so that we don't have to do an over excavation later to put back material. We like to prep it in that sense, but we don't actually put in the systems themselves.
Now, the medical building looks like there's no maintenance area or access to the back of it. It slopes away almost immediately.
Correct.
So it's kind of, maybe if they ever decided to, probably wouldn't come close enough, but would they ever think of considering a different kind of situation there so they can get around that building, or are they gonna leave it like that?
I mean, at this point, based on the proposal, we're not expecting the need for any kind of loading operations back there, or circulation around there. So, you know, at this point, we're not, you know, we didn't feel that as a necessity. Obviously, any changes to the footprint would have to come back to both this commission and planning.
How about
so.
fire equipment?
Well,
Would that be required?
so based on the size of the building, it's gonna have to be sprinklered, and based on the fact that we have access around 75% of the building perimeter,
Okay,
that satisfies that requirement, so it's not necessary.
that's good.
This is city water?
Yes, yep. City water is available in Monroe Turnpike. We're bringing in a 10-inch main onto the property to provide both fire and domestic service for all the buildings.
Unfortunately, sewers are about 100 yards away, but a world away.
So there's no reason for any access out the back of that building,
That building?
like emergency access or anything like that? And,
And it's a little hard to see, but there is a little bit of a graded area that's relatively flat, or, you know, close to it behind there. We do have it is a little bit of a steeper slope with that stabilized, but we don't see the need for access back there.
This is one of my pet, not complaints, but just requests. And that is, did you or will you consider pervious pavement for the walkways?
For the walkways.
For the walkways. If you think about it, it requires no sand, no salt. There's no ice. I've seen it, it's wonderful, and I mean, I go to the edge all the time, and the buildup of any little dip in the parking lot, granted, this is not parking lot, but any little dip anywhere, ice is over, they have to throw sand on it, they gotta salt on it, and all kinds of stuff. If it's pervious, especially on the sidewalks, first of all, you're doing drainage, and secondly, you're eliminating a major cost long-term cost for your developer. And
What's the long-term
from a
cost
health,
savings?
excuse me?
What's the long-term cost savings?
Well, you don't need as much maintenance for
The problem with the pervious.
snow clearing
I know, because
and for sanding and salting.
So there's I'm sure Ray can jump into this too, but there's a whole lot of stuff that comes into play when you're dealing with impervious pavements.
Understood in the parking
Pervious
lot where there is a lot more dirt involved and where it needs to be vacuumed and stuff once a year.
It's-
But for areas like this, they're really very efficient.
So every sidewalk, whether it's here or any other center, you've got to do snow removal and you got to sand it, or you have to salt it, because if
You have liability
you
issues.
or anybody else is walking along that sidewalk and they slipped on ice, that's a
But it
liability issue.
melts as soon as and it just dissolves right
It
into the.
doesn't. I can tell you, I own a number of buildings where we put pervious pavement, large medical building up on Park Avenue, and it is, yeah, it's extremely difficult to maintain. And then if it's not, if you have two different types of materials on the same property, you've got to get a contractor who's got to, you almost have to stake out where the impervious and the pervious, where one starts and where one ends, because they both have to be treated separately. And it'd be one thing if we needed for the drainage and you had to do the whole parking lot impervious pave to treat all of your snow. But when you have multiple, in other words, you do a portion of it just to collect some drainage, and then you'd have impervious next to it, it's a recipe for a lot of difficult, and frankly, I can tell you the cost is considerably higher with and a tremendous more amount of maintenance and
from
very difficult to maintain the pervious when it abuts the impervious stuff. So it all sounds good until you have to put in operation treating the two types of materials at the same time when there's a storm, and you can't get the guy to put the yellow flags out to say, well, wait a second, from here on in you gotta lift, and from here on in you can zip, you know, and here you can sand and here you can't. It becomes a very difficult operation if you're not doing the whole thing in one similar material. I've dealt with it as an owner and as an attorney, but not as an engineer. But
As an owner?
yeah,
Oh, you mean on one of your properties?
yeah. It's very, very difficult. Typically, unless the pervious material, you try to, unless it's necessary to really handle the extra drainage, it's a very difficult thing to do in a mixed component.
And on the engineering side, as you know, the drainage layer that's required underneath those pervious pavements, what you need from a receiving standpoint for the proper material, it needs to be, it needs to be done over like sandy soil or sand and gravel, something that's very porous and that's going to provide that exfiltration. And when you try to propose that over the glacial till with a higher fine content that we have typically throughout the town of Monroe and usually in the Northeast, it's very difficult because you have to do so much over excavation actually put in that material, and then you still have to provide a way for that actually to drain out. Because if you can't provide that sieve all the way down to groundwater or something like that, you're gonna have to then put in additional drainage within that. And you know, University of New Hampshire has great installations of it. University of Connecticut has some good installations from it. I have two interns from we had a lunch and learn with the stormwater management company coming in last week, and my two interns from UConn both asked about how important impervious pavement is, or pervious pavement was. And the reality is, in the Northeast, it is incredibly difficult to install because of the weather and the freeze and the need for sanding and salt, because the minute that even for asphalt, right? They found that, you know, people won't get out of their cars if it looks like there's ice on asphalt, like certain populations and demographics. Pervious pavement is great in southern climates where you're building on, you know, sandy soils and things like that, where you don't have that freeze insulation, but it's really, really difficult to do in a commercial application in the Northeast.
And that was confirmed by the UNH people, who were the ones that started this whole thing?
If you go to the UNH facility, it is pristine, and they've created these areas in certain like optimal test sites that aren't commercial applications. They're not commercial driveways, and they're not, you know, they're consistently vacuumed and maintained because it's a university institutional setting. It's different than trying to do something like this on you know, a commercial shopping center. It's a challenge.
I gotta keep trying.
No, I try too. I want to do it more. I'm a lead accredited professional. I haven't worked on one lead building. I incorporate all that stuff into what we do because it's good practice, the same way that you're talking about. But you know, it's hard to justify that sometimes.
Okay.
And I know those were probably both two very long-winded responses.
Well, I felt the pain of it, so I'm happy to express it.
I see the mountains of salt. You know, of course, more is always better. And especially this past winter, you know, where they dumped entire bags of salt.
Well, I'll tell you the problem too is when you have two things, medical and retail, both users want immediate relief. They want the snow off the ground. They want these things salted and sanded. The medical especially, because you tend to have people who who need, it's got to be crystal clear, because you have people who are impaired typically coming into these things, and if not, the tenants want their patients to feel safe coming into it. The last thing you want to do is a guy breaking his hip on his way to see the orthopod.
I get it.
Good for lawyers, but that's about it.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any other commission members? Scott?
No, I'll go over my comments with them.
We're leaving it open for next time, right?
Yeah.
Is that what I'm saying? I have a question that's imperative to inland wetlands. Do you have a restaurant tenant?
What's that?
Do you have a restaurant tenant?
We have numerous people interested in the site.
I'm really concerned about how it's gonna affect this wetland. Who's gonna be in that restaurant? in town?
Do you have a request?
No, I'm very concerned.
We have enough pizza places, oh my God.
Okay,
Message heard, message received. We got it.
all right. Nothing else from the commission. I'll open up for public comment, but we're keeping the hearing open, right? So, is there any members of the public here that would like?
One thing you should get in the habit of is reading the exhibits before the public comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just in case there's something in the exhibits that the public may be interested in.
You're always thinking, Scott.
So,
Would you please?
And then obviously, when there's obviously going to be more exhibits, so that the next meeting you would read the rest of it.
Absolutely.
okay, exhibit number 1 is certificate of mailing receipts. Exhibit number 2 is bond sheet, document dated June 8th. Exhibit number 3 were town engineer comments by Scott Schatzline, document dated June 19th. And exhibit number 4 were the abutter notification mailing receipts. That's it.
Thank you.
And just for the record, we should probably state that the notice was published twice in the Monroe Courier, June 14th, 2018, and Thursday, June 21st, 2018.
How did I forget? You just did on the last one.
I know, but that's okay.
Thank you.
Everything else is out there.
All right. Any members of the public here want to make any comments in support of this application? Any members of the public present here tonight want to make any comments in opposition to? Any members of the public here want to make a comment of a general nature in regards to this application? Seeing none, I'll see you guys at our next meeting, which is when, for the record?
It is July 25th.
July the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
July.
Nice evening.
Oh, it's because it's still June, and Kevin's still here.
Still want to know what the tenant, the restaurant.
Both of them?
Kevin, you're still here? You're gonna stay for another one?
I think I'm done, I think.
All right.
Hey, Kevin.
I'm gonna
Are
call
both
this.
of them on there?
Kevin.
All right, let's pull it
Both of
together,
the
people.
applications
Yeah,
are on
I
there?
saved the vote.
Okay. What did it say? You take a 5 minutes?
5-minute recess.
Thank you.
All right, we're back in session. Next is IWC 2018-08, 96 and 112 Barnhill Road, Payne. It's a subdivision referral.
Sorry. Okay, you guys probably remember that I told you about this, and you saw a little bit of it. Was it last meeting or the meeting before, when we asked you or I asked you from a procedural, actually you didn't see this, I asked you from a procedural standpoint, would you want the soils identified through a soil scientist? And you said no, so we did not do that. This is for a two-lot subdivision. It's a piece of property that was subdivided many years ago. Several years ago, was subdivided illegally and sold off, and a house was built there, so there was a house on both properties. It came to the attention of the property owners, I guess recent transaction or whatever, and that they're trying to make it right. So they're bringing this in as a re-subdivision. They're not proposing to do anything other than to establish or file the plan showing the property line. Houses are built, the yards are developed, Everything's been there for, I don't forget what it was, something like 15 to 20 years.
At least.
Yeah, at least, so
Long
they've
as I
been there a
can
long
What, they
time.
think it was a first cut and it turned out like it wasn't or something?
I think that was along, yeah, I think it was along those lines,
But they got a building permit.
they
Put a
got the
house up.
permit, and goes back years and years. So, they're just trying to go through the process now to re-subdivide the property. So that's what it is. It is just a re-subdivision referral. There's no proposed regulated activity. The regulated activity happened before the adoption of the wetland regulations.
So it's automatically a regular meeting then, because there's no public input required.
Well, I actually asked Darcy that, because we had a little discussion about it in the office, and her response, and I understand it and agree with it now, is that if a subdivision comes in and you're going to do a referral to the Planning and Zoning Commission, you know, would have to meet that criteria, either a significant activity, which in this case it's not, or would have the potential for public interest. And she's saying that, you know, it's theoretically someone could come up and have some information for you that would maybe be applicable to a re-subdivision that would change your input that goes to P&Z. So it is possible that you could rule it that. That's not to say you have to.
Yeah, I move that we go to a regular meeting.
I'll second it.
I have a motion by Commissioner Stewart to move to a regular meeting on this, and a second by Commissioner Spence. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so that'll be on your next meeting for subdivision referral. Okay, next one is 275 Moose Hill. This just came in yesterday. It's for a one existing,
Single-family home.
single-family home on an existing residential lot. The lot is 1.26 acres. Wetlands on the property are 29 square feet. It just touches, the wetlands has one flag that goes onto the property. So it's 29 square feet. And upland review area, 0.59 acres. Of those areas, 0 acres of wetlands to be disturbed and 0.42 acres, or 18,393 square feet of upland review area to be impacted. It's, you know, typical house construction with septic system, grading. You know, I didn't see if they have a retention system. Let's see. Yes, they have a. Oh, that's an underground. Yeah, they've got a recharge system that is next to the driveway, between the driveway and the wetland area.
Can I move we go to a public hearing, public interest, potential impact to the wetlands?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Stewart, second by Commissioner Spence, to move this to a public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Page one, done.
So this could theoretically be on the July docket then, right?
Yeah, well, we schedule it as, you know, whatever works out as soon as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to deliberations. items completed from this agenda. I think the only thing we completed was 45 Pepper Street. How would we like to direct our staff on this request of our staff?
Well, you already directed me to do
No, they have to do it.
No, this is, we're delivering from the public hearing today, that we did today, we completed today,
Right.
right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I jumped.
It's all right,
Yeah,
you missed that one line. Yeah, I get you.
Okay, sorry about that.
So, do we want to ask Scott to draft a letter of approval with conditions, or draft a denial letter? Well, that's our two choices at the moment. Lois is being stubborn.
Somebody else can say.
Aggregate, that stone.
Can I, even though, no, I can't, Mr. Chairman.
Why can't you talk?
I can't motion.
He's
I can't
not supposed to
motion.
make motions.
Well, if you were gonna make a motion, what would it be?
Approve with conditions. Right, unless, are you guys prepared to deny this application?
No, I make a motion that we approve with
Well,
conditions.
We're asking Scott to,
Oh.
how we do it now is we ask Scott to draft an approval letter
Oh,
with
sorry.
conditions, and then we make the motion
Oh,
at the next meeting, right?
okay.
Those
So-
are those draft approvals I send to you for review.
Yes, I reviewed it.
You do.
So we wanna ask, I'm assuming what you mean, Commissioner Clark, is that we wanna ask Scott to draft a letter of
Yes.
approval with conditions. So I think we'll start with some conditions. Scott, you wanna start with yours?
Yep, okay, so, we're gonna, look at, well, I had a question on, how long ago the site was filled, but it clearly was a very long time ago, they used huge trees, so I'm
Those
gonna
big
take that
trees,
out.
right?
Take that out.
Yeah, it's been sitting derelict for a
That,
long
I'm
time.
gonna add in that they'll provide, construction fencing around the kidney-shaped, landscaped island to remain off the southwest corner of the retaining wall. That they round off the silt fence and the limit of disturbance at the southwest corner of the property, to relocate up toward where the pathway is. That they show the hydrodynamic separator system, underground storage system. Confirm the length of flow around the UGS systems. No, that's a no for me. Request sweeper on the site at all times, a mechanical sweeper on the site at all times.
And use it.
And put
The devil's in the details.
in O&M plan to be posted in the building.
That separator that's
Is
posted
it in the, like a maintenance plan? or something?
Yeah, operations. All right, then I got, these are just the ones I wrote down tonight. 3 catch basins at the southwest, along the south property line, along southwest of the end of the retaining wall, and at the surge pile to be revised to include sediment containment inserts, and that also to be put on the O&M plan and put in the building. Move the sediment basin, phase 1 to above, to the area above the retaining wall, once the retaining wall is built. Provide detail for the modular block wall that they discussed and offered. Provide linear, provide liner for the detention system to avoid runoff conflict with the retaining wall. And then I've got my previously done comments for drainage. Well, I had an item for the debris in the lower upland review area next to the wetlands at the, I think I'll put something in about removing any visible debris.
As offered.
tires and all that, right?
I just had an idea. don't know if it's too late to mention it, but, you know, that surge pile they're talking about, being close to the drainage, why wouldn't those have like a backstop? Because, you know, if you get to the end of the pile, you know, guy's not he's a careless operator, although, you know, he can continue to push that pile, try and load the bucket and get it close to the catch basin. Where if there was like kind of a return, like a backstop wall, he would never push it past a certain spot.
Yep.
Same thing with all the other piles too, actually.
Yeah.
I'm leaning towards the pile being covered.
I don't think that stuff bleeds off that much.
Can we pull it back up there?
I think the other piles, if we can get some.
I mean, the other piles, I would
Piles
say,
along
clean
the
them.
back of the building,
Yeah,
I think those would be difficult with the bins, because I think the vehicles are going through there, you know what I mean? They're gonna clean that right out.
well, I would say those have to, I would say those have to
More?
be cleaned up on a
No, I
daily
think that's
basis.
good.
You know, at the end of each day, they have to be cleaned.
There's no
That's
trucks
impossible
driving
to
around the
police,
screening
though.
building.
You know?
Well, I know,
That's just the
but,
loader.
you know, I mean, those, if it's wet out there and they're working, and then the other thing is the whole, when they're working in the rain and those piles coming pouring out of the buildings and they're moving dirt and they're tracking it all over the place and the water's running down the pavement.
Well, if they had a backstop on each one of those piles, okay, call it a backstop, that's what I'm calling it. Then at the very end of every day, it's very easy to clean up all the activities of the day. If you don't, you're never gonna scoop up all of it, it's just gonna keep,
Yeah,
you're gonna push it down.
Push it around.
You're gonna push it around. So if each one had a little backstop, now it might be a bit of a challenge to get, I don't know what the dimension is from, the pile closest to the S of Soli. Now, to get around that one, to get to the other pile, I know what the access is to okay, but if they had a little, you know, if they made it like a bin, but just small, it doesn't have to be much, 4 feet high, enough the width of the loader bucket, then they could clean up like almost everything at the end of every day
I'm sure they
and
will,
have it in
because they're gonna
the
want
covered
something.
bin. So
They're
if
gonna
they're,
want something to push up against.
that's what I mean. Yeah, something to fill the bucket. It's easy to clean up every day. Just like all the bins are gonna have a concrete wall on the inside, you know, but they're covered. So now there's no excuse to have anything really left over at the end of any
Yeah.
business day that could be getting wet. Now, the pile over that you're talking
The
about,
surge pile.
the surge pile, don't,
That's gonna be a pile of dirt there
This one?
forever.
no,
the time.
that should probably be no more than a day's worth of crushing.
Yeah, but they're gonna take in whatever is brought in. Look at the size of that pile.
Yeah,
That thing is-
that facility, I'm
That thing is-
sure will be able to handle what's there.
That's a
So,
75-foot diameter pile that they've got there.
Yeah, so it's gonna be 75 feet high.
That's.
well, they can't stockpile that high.
No.
They'll probably get 15 feet with the loader that'll be on that
I'm
side.
just saying we've gotta be prepared for that pile to always have dirt there. Just a big pile of dirt on asphalt.
Yeah, I mean, I
'Cause
just they're not gonna want just dirt, there's gonna be rock, there's gonna
Oh,
be
yeah, rock,
concrete, there's gonna
concrete,
be asphalt.
asphalt.
And
It's gonna be.
piles like that don't typically bleed a lot. They really don't. You know, there's so much rock in there, it's not like you can have a huge slide of mud. It's not gonna be mud, mud is not resaleable.
Yeah.
They're not gonna wanna bring in stuff that they can't sell.
Yeah.
You know, they're gonna bring in stuff from their
Yeah,
own
but he's willing
business,
to, he's
they have their
willing
own
to
business.
put bins everywhere else. You know what I mean? He processes this thing and he puts it in a bin.
I'm surprised he doesn't just have a sifter throwing the material right in the bins.
Well, they're gonna put it in. Well,
Well,
the
it's
thing is
crushing
that
it,
to
the
have a
difference.
truck loader into the crusher would be a big massive structure, a huge ramp. Or another, it would expand the size of the building so they have a lower trough with a conveyor. That's really the most logical way to do it. You're gonna have a loader run around feeding the plant anyways and unloading. I've been to many of these operations, I've run these operations, so I know a little bit about it. If they're bringing in more than a day's worth of crushing, they're just gonna run out of room. They're gonna have to stop. Yeah, I mean, you just can't clog up the scale. You can't, clog up the axles
I
of the
think they're
trucks.
gonna-
It's
They're
gonna
not
be
gonna
very
drive,
difficult.
they're not gonna be able to turn the truck around.
Yeah,
That's
but I
right.
mean, people are gonna be coming in at 4 o'clock at night
You know,
with that last load and it's going on the ground.
it's a little unfortunate you didn't get
Right,
into
they're gonna come in
this
late.
level discussion with them. I mean, one of the thoughts I had was, on the down gradient side of that area, that storage area, if they maintain like a crushed stone berm, then the pile will be sitting there, and then any runoff off the pile will have to filter through the crushed stone to get onto the pavement
Well,
to
how
go
about we
down.
make that as a referral comment to P and Z?
You could do that.
Well, what about a half-circle concrete retainer, almost do the same thing?
problem is now
It's
we
also-
closed
that's
the
it's
gonna
also
hold
backstop.
back, that's gonna hold back the runoff if you do that.
And the
Yeah.
thing is, we can't introduce
We closed the hearing,
a lot
and,
of
yeah, we can't
information
just
at
like,
this point because we've closed the
Yeah,
hearing.
you can't introduce.
So, but what we could do is make some of those comments to P and Z as referral comments. So they're not something that we're dictating, because it wasn't in our hearing. But P and Z can hopefully grab the ball and run with it at that point. So,
So provide permanent,
Retaining wall or-
sedimentation control measures for all the outside storage piles.
Yeah, I think they've gotta clean.
we asked
I think
them
we've
that.
gotta tell them that those piles be cleaned up every day.
Well, you've got that in,
The end of
that's
the
gonna be
day.
one of your
Okay.
conditions. And then as far as the control measures, you're gonna suggest, crushed stone, berms,
But that's in a parking lot. That's paved-
concrete, what do we wanna call it, cheek wall, concrete?
where will you go?
Well, on the ones that are south of the building, they'd be like an L shape.
Yeah.
So that, just an L shape that comes out and then goes down, but, I mean, they can't be such that they block the runoff.
Where? Did you grab the mouse? Because I'm.
They
an
would
L
be
could go
here
anywhere.
like that, like an L that comes out and then goes west. And so they provide a way or depending upon what the grading is, I guess it could go this way and they could grade it so it goes around.
I don't know how they're
and
getting to that pile around the other pile, unless they're just gonna be really, really good with managing those piles.
But like, for instance, this
You don't think
area,
they're just gonna come from the back, from the road's end and push the whole thing
well,
around?
his point is, they could come from either direction, whatever direction they got the wall, they push up against it to use the loader.
I think they're making one product at a time. I don't
No,
think
they
they're
all,
making-
they all happen at
You
once.
think they all coming out, they're
Yeah,
all
there's
coming
gonna be a
out?
bunch of piles out here.
There'll always be 4 piles. The first one is a scalper, and then there's 3 product screener in the back of the building.
Right there, yeah.
So there's 2 in the back,
So
one at
bigger
the end
stone
and one on the front.
filters out here, screens out here,
So,
screens out there,
I
right?
think you gotta leave it open-ended and let
It
them
really
work it
depends,
out
like, they
with
could
P&Z.
actually, if they're making they demand for a certain product, they might not even have the scalper running. Like, if they just need to make a lot of process, they want everything to go through. If they're trying to make clean stone, they're gonna want all the dirt to come off and not go into the crusher, and then it dirties the stone. So they're probably gonna have, based on where they are with bins and what their demands are at the current time, because they're a big paving company, massive, they do a lot of paving, so they may need more process this month per this contract, they're gonna adjust how they're crushing to make the stuff that they need. Not to mention the retail market, they have to have all the different products, they don't know who's gonna come in off the road, but I'm sure they're probably serving, a good portion of this material is gonna serve their own project.
You know what it comes down to? It really comes down to who is operating the site itself. You know, are they a messy operator, or are they gonna really be clean about it? And there's very little control we have over that.
Yeah.
You know, it really depends.
I'm guessing
One
they're
thing
trying
that's
to
maybe a
efficient
good
out.
sign is that they're proposing this order and these storage bins that have covers over them and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of other operators that would come in and they don't wanna do any of that.
Yeah,
Right,
You know,
just
it's
big
true.
old
So Nor-
cubbies, yeah.
If it makes a difference to you guys, their Norwalk yard is pretty clean.
That's good to know.
Has it got wood frogs?
So,
No, they're making a big investment.
let me put something in about the referral for these, and we'll, that P and Z should consider that, such as blah, blah, blah. And
Okay.
then we'll see where that goes. And then, let me just finish the rest of this. I have a couple comments under providing calculations for the capacity of the hydrodynamic separators. They need to correct some of their stuff in the drainage about their combined PDA 1 and PDA 2 flows, combined with EDA 1 and EDA 2, that kind of stuff. Stage storage tables still need some tweaking to reflect the crushed stone voids and not the whole crushed stone and everything else. Sedimentation erosion control, just a comment about basin number 2. I had a comment about basin number 2, which is in this area that you were talking about, Jim, that, see this tree line right here? That's a proposed tree line being cut back a little bit, and I'm just saying, well, why do you have to do that? I mean, there's this pathway that goes down there, and I think it's on paper that they're showing that, but in reality, I think it's just a canopy that happens to be hanging over where they're gonna put that sediment trap. So, coming into the meeting, I was more adamant about, hey, they should move that so they're not doing any clearing there. But now I'm thinking it's probably more of a construction management thing, like when they're actually down there starting to do the work to try to get them not to cut the trees. I don't think they want to cut trees down there any more than they have to, because it's out of the way and that kind of thing. So I think I'm gonna suggest we leave that out, and I'll try to do my best during the construction.
This site would have been one of those that would have been good to walk.
Yes,
I
it would have
think we
been,
would have,
because I walked
known a
it,
lot, or did you?
and you would have seen some of going down in here, there's a pit, there's a gravel pit right here where they dug gravel out.
Oh, jeez.
And they're not proposing really to change that, And there's another pit or area.
That doesn't show in the contours, though.
They're planting that whole area.
You really, and I don't look at everything either. Sometimes it's really hard
It
with
is,
the ticks
I know.
and the brush getting in there and seeing it. This was one of the properties that you could have seen, because it was
Right.
the house and stuff. And it was, to see this wetland and this pool area down there, it really is a vibrant looking,
How'd that house sneak in there?
very pristine looking, very
They all
good
used to be
looking wetland.
houses on there.
Really?
And then gradually, they just started making them into business areas, and then the town gave in and made them into business, and then they got made into industrial, because that's how, it was one of those tail wagging the dog thing, in a lot of cases. They all
Well, I
started
mean,
off
every
as
town
houses.
needs its commercial areas.
Yeah, well,
And the thinking is, the houses go away eventually when people buy up the land and combine the land, and you got bigger pieces of property. It is what it is at this point, it's a commercial zone. All right, next item, I think that's it for my comments, and then I go down to the $24,000 bond. So I'll put something together for you.
Anybody else have anything else they want to add besides what Scott, we talked about with Scott already?
you got to remove the debris, right, as
Yes.
offered? Okay,
And the reasons.
that's all I have.
1 and 3.
1 and 3. And this was a public hearing, so we have to have that one that you were just talking about on your notes
And,
somewhere.
can you guys just put a little effort into looking at those reasons? For instance, if there is,
Which you all got copies of tonight.
if there is a significant activity, you must be getting verification and stating that there is no other feasible and prudent alternative. That's something that you have to do. So we want to make sure that the reasons, coincide with
We
what's
need to
going on.
define significant activity. Because, is that significant activity causing an impact? Or is it just significant activity that's not gonna cause an impact?
Well, I think that
And that's-
significant activity is defined through the state model and all that stuff. So.
All right, well,
And
we
it's-
need to
it's
learn
a-
more about that.
Yeah, it's unfortunately low, so I know what you're saying, like, you'd like it to be if there's a pipe discharge right next to the wetland, you'd like that to be a significant
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah.
The problem is, it's not. And therefore, you get the applicants standing in front of you saying, there is no significant impact.
Right.
Yeah, and I hear you.
No direct impact.
No
That's
direct,
big.
yeah, no
No
direct.
impact.
All right, so I'll put together something for you, and you guys can check it out.
Did we get a second on that? I know
No,
that
there's no.
I didn't.
We're not,
We're
we're no
not
motion.
clerk made a motion to,
Yeah, but then we corrected
Draft
ourselves, that we're not making a motion to approve, we're asking that you guys draft that approval
Okay.
letter.
okay, just double checking, I'm tired tonight, sorry.
I mean, theoretically,
Me too.
you can make a motion.
Let's follow what we're doing.
Yeah, but
I
it
finally
works
got it
well the way you
down,
do it.
don't change it.
Yep.
Okay. So now,
We move on to eight.
the next item of our agenda is IWC 2018-04R, 8 Maple Drive. Scott and our staff have drafted that approval letter that we all got in our email. So,
Move to approve as drafted.
I have a motion by Commissioner Spence, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gingrich. All those in favor
Okay,
say...
hold on, just
Wait.
summarize really quickly. It's a 7-page approval letter that I put together that includes all of the items that you directed me to put in there. We also provided each commission, you all could read that draft, and,
As a standard procedure.
yeah, and that is in front of you this evening, so that's what you're voting.
Excellent.
Am I good to vote on this?
Are you here?
I don't remember.
For the last meeting?
You were here.
That was the only,
For all of them?
only hearing? I'm just asking, I don't wanna, mess something up here, you know?
Okay,
I could watch. I could have, but I didn't.
You were here.
At least for some of them.
you were here at the last meeting.
Yo, yeah, definitely, I remember that one.
You
The
were
one
not
behi-
at the
that- one
meeting
before
before
that.
it, but you were at the May 9th, and I think that was,
The one before it, I think, was continued, wasn't it?
I don't think we did,
I don't think we
Did anything that
It
day?
was,
Okay, sounds good.
I don't think we did any of the
It
maples
was
on the
delayed
meeting
so many
before.
times. that
Right,
we
hold
will
on, I'll
lost-
tell you.
Listen, if you have to be at every time we look at this, only me and Lois can vote.
4 years in the making, yeah.
Her perfect attendance?
No, not my perfect attendance.
It's been
just
going
that
on
That's how long,
It's been
that's how long
before
we're looking
it-
at those applications.
Oh.
Predates everybody else's
it
seat.
was reviewed, you can vote.
I can, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Donna.
so all those in favor,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yeah, he's abstaining.
Aye.
No
I made
opposition,
the
no,
motion.
none opposed, any abstention?
Aye.
Okay, so,
They-
the motion passes with one abstention.
So it's 501.
Excellent. Goodbye, 8 Maple. IWC 2018-05-R, 4 Maple Drive, O'Keefe.
This is the driveway.
Move to approve as drafted.
I have a
Second.
motion by Commissioner Spence to approve as drafted, a second by Commissioner Stewart.
Left on Sunday.
Okay, so this is a 6-page letter, and it was provided to everybody prior to the meeting. Everybody's received it and had a chance to read it, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so everybody's read it, and I don't think there's anything else to say.
Okay, done.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes with one abstention. All right.
Okay, bond releases and reductions, I-0507 for 123 Riding Ridge Road. Topic, this is a single-family residential house that was built, retaining wall back with it had a patio with some plantings, and all the work is done in compliance with the approval.
Okay. Do you recommend that we release the bond?
Yes.
So moved.
It's a $2,000.
We have a motion by Commissioner Spence to release the bond. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Masterrocco. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passed unanimously.
Okay, next one, I have a recommendation for release of the $2,000 bond for IWC 2015-06, which is 176 Hammertown Road. This was a pond dredging, if you recall, that they went ahead and did it. There's the pictures of it. Came out pretty nice, and the things, as you can see, are pretty stable.
How long was this? Long time ago.
They just did.
2015.
That bush
Yeah.
right there, that's, you're looking at straight, not that one, the next one, nope, down, right there, that died. But aside from that, the
Pull the
pictures are
bond.
the same. Those, and that wasn't a requirement, it was an
Okay.
added bush.
Okay, approve the bond.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to release the bond.
So moved.
As recommended. Motion by Commissioner Spence to
Seconded.
release it, second by Commissioner Gingrich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Release that bond.
Jim does not have a second.
Next we have agent approvals.
Opportunity.
Okay.
There were no time extensions, sorry, sorry.
All right, let's listen.
Inland Wetlands agent activities, we had IA 2018-08, which is 47 Crown View Drive, which was for a propane tank and a gas line. IAA 2018-09, which is 11 Joan Drive for a generator and propane tanks. IAA 2018-10 for 9 Bridge Road, construction of a deck. And IA 2018-11 for 121 Nora Road, construction of a 3-season porch. We've been busy, and Denise has been cranking through.
Excellent.
Permitted uses as of right. Public Works has indicated that, actually it was 2 days ago, or was it yesterday? They went in and took out portions of a beaver dam that was at 160 Bug Hill Road. 160 Bug Hill Road is, Bug Hill Road, this is Cutler's Farm. This comes up and curves right here, and then Bug Hill is right here. Conrad
And
made
that
this.
property is.
Yeah, Conrad made this for me at the last minute, and I didn't realize that it wasn't a smaller view of it, if we could see it. But Bug Hill is right over here. The property is off of Bug Hill, but there's a culvert that goes under Cutler's Farm Road right here. You can see the dark brook. And right in here somewhere was a plug up of beaver stuff. So the
Industrious.
beaver won't be happy, but the public works did.
Did they remove it, or did they put the pipes in?
I believe they removed it in this case.
Okay.
We'll be back in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Back already.
All right, so now we're on to enforcement. We got nothing from this agenda, and we're on to administrative review and enforcement issues. IWV 2018-07, 63 Countryside Drive. This is a new one. Actually, I'm going to do these two together. The next one is IWV 2018-08, 557 Monroe Turnpike, 111 Century Plaza, which is Sippin, Dave Sippin.
Oh.
And,
Not again.
yeah, here.
Well,
So, what we've got here is, we've got a situation where it's two violations, but it's really one. It's this purple area. The 557's this little corner here, and then it goes way down into the Sippin's commercial property. This is up at Countryside Drive, which is, Countryside Drive is here. The road comes down, there's a cul-de-sac, and there's a driveway that comes off. The property here, this property's driveway comes out here and then over to the cul-de-sac. So what's happened is, there's a conservation easement. This cross-hatched area is conservation easement, and the green area is the wetland.
Okay.
So the driveway originally came in over here. Well, this guy has cleared and filled into this area here. And it's like a pull-off area. He was splitting wood. There's a pile of mulch. There's pallets. There was some equipment there. And that
Notice of
equipment's
violation.
gone at the moment. Yeah, and so,
So he piped it, or it was just
he
wet?
filled it in and he's using it for staging.
Notice of violation.
So I'm assuming you want to go with a notice of violation?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir.
And Sippin is aware of this. He is expecting a notice of violation as well. And he has already sent out a letter to this property owner saying that, hey, you're in violation and I expect you to clean it up and address the town's concerns. So they're both going to get notices of violation. And I think that, well, I guess they'll both have to come before you.
How'd we figure this one out?
Huh? Oh, how did we find out?
Anonymous complaint
Yes.
to the land use office.
Yeah, we had it's in the report here.
So this is a recent work.
There was someone, a neighbor who didn't want
I
to
gave it to
give
you
their
in the
name
packet.
that said that they're doing it. So we went out. And they said it to Sippin, and Sippin called us
Oh,
and said, hey, my other neighbor is telling me there's a problem there. This guy's encroaching on my property, can you help me out and do a enforcement? So that's what's happening with those. So NOV for both.
Okay, moving on to our general discussion or other.
First one, V 13-10, 35 Ridgedale. Denise came in and is telling me that in her inspection of the work that's being done, she met Matt Pop out there, and they uncovered the wetlands. They dug it. This is the Delmeticos. They're private residents.
Oh, I
There's the
remember this
plan, if you remember.
Well, yeah, hold on, and then there's this one, which is, this was the letter,
We all have the letter.
yes.
All right, so.
These are the
Yeah, okay.
pictures.
What? So what happens is, when they took out the fill, this is the wetland soils that they got down to. And.
They took out several feet of fill.
Yeah, and once they got down to these wetland soils, it has stayed wet. I mean, it's just ponded, very, very wet. Matt is saying that he doesn't think the trees that were proposed down here would survive. And you see the letter, he's recommending that it just be left alone, and that he claims that by the fall, and that this is gonna be, it's gonna regrow.
I don't think that's a good idea. They should put in a wetland mix or something. They definitely need to
I
do
had the
something,
same
otherwise it's
concern
gonna be
that-
all Japanese knotweed and bittersweet.
Oh,
and-
come on, you wanna leave it like muddy like that?
What,
Come
it's
on,
so
Lois.
attractive. It's so attractive.
You are so difficult.
I know,
Well,
I
that's what I
know.
was thinking too, that
A
it should
wetland seed
be,
mix.
it should be clean mulch or
Yeah.
not.
So you saying you can't plant a tree in there?
No, it'll be dead.
They
If
could
the
plant
water
some
seeps-
trees.
Actually, we'll have a new vernal pond right there.
December?
Actually,
The
swamp
frogs have
maple,
started growing in there, so frogs will
Ross,
start.
swamp maple would survive in that,
I
wouldn't
mean,
it?
there's some trees back
Well,
in there,
I'd like
right?
to see what's growing along there now. 'Cause
Yeah, there's
whatever's
something
there
along
will
there.
grow
That's
there.
true, that's true.
But then
Yeah.
again, there's gotta be soil for it to, nothing's gonna grow in subsoil.
That's not
a-
subsoil. What he did is he excavated two wetland soils.
It looks kinda yellowy, you know?
It does, but that's probably leftover from the little bit that they didn't get up. 'Cause
She
he
said it
put
was
a
very,
lot
there
of
was a
stuff.
lot of methane.
Yeah, because
She
it's.
stressed that several times.
Absolutely.
It was
Like
very
stunk.
smelly.
So somebody.
So we wanna have them wetland
somebody
mix it,
septic
and then
is now
can we
coming up
follow
through
up in
Do you
6
want,
months?
do you want any kind of
Somebody's
mulch
septic was
over
broken
that,
down.
like a salty mulch or something?
Hey, guys,
One person at a time?
I don't know. I'm not the
I
expert
think
on
they need to do
this.
some homework. Get a soil scientist, somebody,
Well,
really
Matt
with some
Pop is
experience.
technically supposed to be that.
Let me suggest this, do you want him to come before you so you can discuss it?
I think
Because
so.
it's gotta wait till next month though.
Yeah, I think you should seed it now and then come to us.
Okay, all right. And then by then,
With
he might be able to
Lois's,
come with a picture
wetland
saying
mix.
that, see what it looks like now.
Mm.
But in the meantime, you want it overseeded with wetland seed mix.
Yeah, and tell us what kind of trees are growing in the back that can't live.
Yeah, that's true. We could get a report from Matt Pop and say, you know, he should be able to identify what is there.
Those Swamp
Adjacent to it.
birches.
You mean,
Gotta be a plant
what's
that'll
growing
live
What's
behind it?
growing behind it? Yeah,
The
because
weeping
chances are,
willows
the
or
same thing
swamp
will grow in
birches
front of it.
and swamp.
There's a plant for almost every condition.
Yeah.
That's right.
I see trees growing in piles of sand from, at a quarry. I mean,
Mhm.
Okay, so provide wetland seed mix or do it right away and come to the next meeting, Matt, I'll put, come to the next meeting and provide a report on what's going, you know, on the planting behind there and, what, by then, what the status of it is.
Are there rocks all the way around the back edge of that?
Yeah, she tells me that, they uncovered, those are stumps. So they uncovered stumps and large rocks that were in it, and they were in the process of like, oh, we're gonna remove the stumps and the rocks. She said, no, just leave them.
Well, those are the trees that couldn't survive
Right,
and grew
when
to
they-
be 12 inches
yeah.
in diameter in that dirt.
Right.
That's a very good point.
Yeah,
He's
he
telling you
probably
that the
buried
trees won't
them.
survive, and
They all
there's,
died,
you know, there's
They were
12-inch
living at one
diameter
time.
trees that were there.
right.
So,
You cut them down first and then
yeah,
just,
good point. So,
flatten them.
I'll relay that information. All right, next one.
Just don't use my name, will you?
tell them, Jim said. Jim's fault.
Just has to watch the video.
So we got those two.
107 North Road.
Next one, 107 North Road, that is a septic repair. The health department is telling us that their septic system has failed. And
Don't tell me they put a pool in the reserve area.
they, oops.
We have it.
So you got a wetland here. We don't know the extent of the wetlands. We know that there's a little brook back here. All right, it's a fairly flat yard, so there could be respective wetlands here. I don't know. But they want to put in 2 leaching fields here that are kind of strategically placed to avoid as many trees as possible. And the question is, can they come in with an agent approval to do that, or do you want them to come in to the commission with an application?
But how can they put in a septic system if they don't know where the wetlands are? Because you can't put a septic system in the wetlands because it won't work.
Well, I think that they're in the process of doing their testing, and they believe that that'll
Right.
perk out and test out, okay, which tends to say that it's not a wetland. I mean, it's
Right.
not gonna, if it's suitable for septic system leaching area, it's not a wetland.
Then I think you should be able to deal with it just fine.
Agent approval, yeah.
Okay, so agent approval?
Agent approval.
Yes.
Yep.
Agent approval, but let me ask you this. Should you require, or advise me to require a soils report for the agent approval?
No.
Well, wait a minute, if,
Well, if it perks,
Well, if
then
the
they can-
perks perk out,
Yeah, okay.
if they don't, then
then they'll have to do something else
just make sure
anyway.
that they
Well,
do
if
the
they go to
perks
the
at the
soil
far
test,
end of the
if they
site.
dig down there and they find that it's all wetlands, then I guess.
They won't be able to put the
then-
fields there anyway.
Well,
right?
Rich
Yeah,
Jackson would
they'll have
also.
to raise the grade, in which case
Observe
you can
it.
ask for a wetlands report.
Yeah, all right. So,
Yeah, if it doesn't perk out, maybe they need to come to us.
well,
at that
yeah, if
point.
it doesn't perk out, they're gonna have to move it, so it'll be
Right.
somewhere else.
Okay.
All right, so,
Those
agent approval.
What?
Those red boxes are only representing a theoretical size right now, because they haven't done any testing?
No, they've done some initial testing, and there initially was one row, but he's saying that due to the testing, when he's looking at it, he's pretty sure that they're talking about 2 rows.
Well, can they make it 3 and make it shorter? Is it
No, because
MLSS?
it's the, help me out, Jim,
Don't avoid
I'm not a
trees.
septic person.
I'm not either.
All right, so
Yeah, MLSS. Yeah,
MLSS.
I'm
Yeah.
So with the MLSS systems, there's a minimum length.
Length.
So that says MLSS, okay.
Yeah, so, That's what's going on.
Trees.
All right, so next one is 225 Turkey Roost, Bassani. This is the,
Oh, yeah, there wasn't anything put on this.
this is the one where there was a house built and the father-in-law built the house and put in spruce trees
This
in
was
the
last week.
backyard.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, she
Yeah,
came
last
in, husband died.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is the one.
Carmella, right, the realtor was here.
Yeah.
And the new buyer.
You don't have the plan?
It's got
Different thing?
everybody on to the left, to the right.
Have to lay down and see that.
I guess we gotta
Punchy.
check in the future, like when you put those photos in. All right, so,
I didn't put those on.
oh, somebody did.
Somebody.
Let's get to the bottom of that.
All right, so on this one, you remember this, so she came in and a couple of things. One is this, she's working with her buyer and this area, what was it? Was it this area here? No. Oh, it was these areas here. On paper, it looks like there's a pretty good sized area here, but in reality, between the pine tree, the spruce tree, and the where the boulders would go, there is a, there's only like 5 or 6 feet. She's like, it's not enough room to plant anything, so they just want to leave it the grass and do that. So, I'm getting this confused with something else. So what's happening here is, she has agreed, instead of the boulders, she's agreed to put in a split rail fence. So the split rail fence would be this whole distance of the conservation easement.
Really?
All the way out to there.
Wow, that's a lot of
So-
money, but go ahead.
It is. So she's doing the split rail fence, and she is doing the 2 varieties of plantings.
She's even gonna put it in the woods?
And the plantings that
That's
were
fair.
required were,
So
win-
she's putting this split rail fence in areas that are in the woods? Or just the parts that have been cut out?
just the part that's been cut out.
Okay.
The markers continue into the woods, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the split rail fence goes from here to here.
Okay.
Okay.
360 feet, I think it is. And then, I'm sorry, the rest are markers that she's gonna do in the woods. So, the plantings you required were northern bayberry, and she's going to substitute, winterberry and bayberry as 2 different varieties in there. Is that okay?
Winterberry's good, but bayberry's kind of garbage plant. It
Okay.
just doesn't do well around here unless it's near the water.
Okay. NG. So what, is there something,
Clethra
can you
alnifolia?
give me like 2 that you would suggest so I can,
Clethra?
how do you spell that?
Clethora.
And Winterberry.
And Winterberry. That's a plethora instead of the,
CLETHRA.
Oh, she already has winterberry. She
right,
wants,
instead, yeah, it's just the plethora
She's
instead
another
of the bayberry. That's all.
Scott just wants to give her 2 more options
Yeah,
instead of
Clethra
bayberry.
or what
Clethra
else
Or what
would
else?
be-
Oh,
What
well,
else?
how about serviceberry? Isn't that
Yeah.
another one?
Yeah, shaglow?
Does that get big and bushy?
Yeah, big.
They never do well on property.
No.
Yeah.
Spice
They,
bush?
they like, I don't
That's
know.
Clethra.
A
I'm just
plethora,
saying.
spice bush?
Yeah,
I-
it's in that family.
Okay, okay.
so Clethra and
Holly?
serviceberry,
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
okay?
Yeah.
All right, next item on that is,
That's another one I like.
there wasn't, unfortunately, there wasn't any deadline, so I'm just gonna suggest, and one of the things we talked about was, she's negotiating with the buyers, they're gonna take over everything, she's just gonna put money in an escrow account. But she said, we all kind of talked about it and thought, the hot summer is not a good time to be doing
Right.
those plantings. So she asked if the deadline, she suggested that the deadline be in the fall. So I'm saying maybe by November 1st,
That sounds right.
okay?
Mm.
All right, so you're okay with that. And then the last thing is what does that say?
Seed mix with milkweed? No,
Smokeweed?
Was that English?
Smokeweed, is that what you said?
There's a smoke.
No, Jim.
Beats the hell out of me.
Let me just think for a second. So she wanted this change in the Bayberry, the overseed with,
Mulch?
I don't remember what that was, something about the seeding.
What type of grass?
You wanted a conservation mix, because it was it's an upland. And
Right, in that
I'm
area,
gonna have them,
behind the fence?
I'm gonna have them weed whack it while they're doing those reports for the first couple of years, and then when the reports are over, then leave it alone, don't do it.
Perfect.
So
Where is this now?
That's
Under
in
where the
these
trees are
areas,
now.
that's in these
But
areas.
It's already got grass, right?
Yeah.
Manicured lawn.
I mean, what are you gonna rip up the
No,
lawn?
I don't know what this note is.
Just let
She
it
wrote
grow.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it said
Right,
like a
all
while.
she's gonna do is she's gonna dig holes,
And put the plants in.
put the plants in, and then,
Don't-
cut it with
Don't
the
mow it
weed
and
whacker.
let it,
Yeah,
don't let it
around-
go
around
wild.
the
up
bush
and
a little
nothing.
bit.
Yeah,
and
until
let
the
it-
bushes get going, and then you leave it alone.
You let the weeds.
Oh, I know what it was. That note is what I already talked to you about, that this area here can be left as grass, the seed mix, in lieu of plantings, because it's not wide enough to put the plantings in. You agree with that?
Mhm.
Okay. And we're gonna confirm that by going out.
You could put a bush in 5 to 6 feet.
It's a spruce tree. There's spruce trees behind it, so you got the
Oh,
split rail
those are
fence and a
like
spruce,
in front of- that's in
spruce
front
tree.
of the-
Spruce tree's gonna grow into it.
Yes,
grow
that's
into
true.
it
Okay, I
very
didn't
well.
realize there was,
You could plant
All
something.
right, so that's a
Spruce tree will
good
kill
thing
it.
I remembered.
All right,
Yeah.
that's it, right?
All right, okay, next one is, that is.
All right, so move on to the minutes of June 13th, 2018.
move to approve with some minor changes.
Oh, tell me I didn't print mine.
You want mine?
Thank you.
This is something
I read them.
that might pop up on us.
In a couple places, Rebecca wasn't sure if it was 15,000 or 50,000 that we talked about as bond. And the first one was on page 4, the last bullet on the very top of the page.
What's
She
it-
has 15,000 / $50,000 bond.
Which application?
I'm sorry.
No,
This was
I can
for-
clarify it and correct it.
For Maple.
Yeah, okay, so, Fort Maple was,
And, yeah, for Maple, and the same thing was mentioned under the deliberations portion, also under for Maple, and that's it.
I believe it was 15. It's 15 now.
I thought it was 15.
Okay.
I have a motion by Commissioner Spence to approve the minutes with some correction. Do I hear a second?
I second. Second? Second.
Everybody seconded.
You have a unanimous second.
Put that in there, I like that.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion passes unanimously. Anything from the Regulation Amendment Committee?
No,
Anything from the Public Outreach Committee?
no.
Regulation Amendment Committee, Donna's trying to set up a meeting, right?
I haven't heard anything yet, so.
Anything from the treasurer?
I heard something.
Serious, throw me.
I heard something from Donna and I put it
I
off.
know
I
she's
heard.
trying, I just hasn't gotten to my.
No,
point.
don't
It just hasn't gotten to my-
I've had numerous phone calls and telegrams from Donna.
I'm just stretching.
I got smoke signals.
All right,
Okay, public outreach, you can do it with that.
Nothing.
Referral, we got a referral, 701, what is it, the referral for Trumbull, 70 something?
Oh, that was,
Well,
I
guys,
just saw that.
can you guys
71,
give me
80,
two more?
What?
Yeah.
7180 and 7192 Main Street, Trumbull.
Yes.
Yeah, now this is a project development project in Trumbull, where they're within, so many feet of 500 feet of Monroe, so they have to provide notice. We got the plan, I looked at it very quickly, but the plan oddly shows activity the property is split, and half of the property is Monroe. And half of the proposed development is in Monroe. So we don't have an application in Monroe.
That wouldn't happen to be 4 Main Street, would it?
No, it's the 70, no.
I know, but doesn't the numbering change when you get to Trumbull?
Yeah, well, that's true, but the building is in Trumbull. So the building, I don't believe, is in Monroe.
Is that the one that's right next to what used to be Domino's Pizza?
Taxes.
Well, this is the one that the back of it is encroaching into the,
Soccer
Olay
field?
soccer.
Yeah, yes, I know
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
which one that is.
okay, so they're,
Huge violation there.
yeah, they have a huge violation
Huge
in the back of the property, which you may want to comment about.
Oh,
Well, I
definitely.
already did.
Yeah, and the front includes activity in Monroe, which isn't in a wetland regulated area, but it's within the zoning
Right.
stuff. So, I'm gonna finish reviewing it and talk to, the Will about it for zoning purposes. Do you want me to comment? I'll comment about the fact that there's a violation in the back extending into the abutting property, and you're just advising Trumbull that's the situation, and that you're expecting them to come in with some.
Is it two different owners? I mean, I don't understand. This is a piece of property where I'll say it's a square piece of property, and the Trumbull part goes around the building, and all the rest of it's in Monroe. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Goes through the building.
It's right on the edge, right by where Domino's Pizza used to be, right next to that, and they've filled in a lot of the parking lot. It's right behind the soccer, remember we did the,
This is 7182 Main Street.
You're connected with that, so you should be recusing yourself on that, just a
Definitely
suggestion.
am.
That means leaving the room
Or at this point right now?
and telling the commission when
I was
before.
about to, I was just trying to make sure we're
I'm
talking about
just-
the right place.
It's okay, yeah,
So I'm
that's,
definitely not involved in this.
yeah,
I mean,
so you probably should.
I want to be recused too.
So the bottom line is you need to do some more research before we know, right?
Well, the problem is, your next meeting is not till the end of
Too
next
late.
month. I'm not gonna have time, so that's why I'm trying to do it now. I'll research it, and we will advise the property owner that, and I think they know, because I spoke with the property owner not too long ago.
Hey, everybody.
So,
good night, Keith.
bye-bye. So you, they know about it already, so it's something that's kind of in the works. But I think you should comment to the Trumbull, town of Trumbull about it, so that they can make it part of their application.
Yes,
Right.
make it so.
Yes.
Okay?
Okay.
Good,
So I'll
thank
do
you, thank you.
Okay, and we have some correspondence.
Just that they were gonna treat Schwartz Pond, which they already did, so it's kind of after the fact.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
A motion to adjourn by Commissioner Stewart. Do I hear a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention?
10:54.
Meeting's adjourned.